Narrative Pro's combat framework really lets you make any type of weapon or combat you could ever want, from modern firearm-based combat to medieval or magic-based styles, and to prove that we rolled out a huge amount of demo content built on it for you to use, learn from, or modify. Bows, swords, shields, rifles, pistols, aim down sights, magic, potions, poisons, dodging, blocking, first-person rendering, idle breaks, ammo, the list goes on and on. For that reason, this video is going to be massive. Don't expect to learn Narrative Pro overnight. This is a really big framework, carefully developed over many years, and there are many systems all interacting and working together. Today we're going to go through the combat framework, show you how it works, how to create new weaponry, and so on. Quick disclaimer, this is not an Unreal Engine tutorial. This is a Narrative Pro tutorial. The more Unreal Engine knowledge you have, the easier you will find Narrative Pro, because Narrative Pro extends Unreal Engine for you. You will also find this video much easier to follow if you have watched our framework video, which explains the bigger picture before we dive into the combat specifically. This tutorial uses Narrative Pro 2.2. If you're watching this video right after it has come out, 2.2 is not out yet, but Pro users can grab 2.2 by following the instructions in the Discord to get an early release. If you're watching this after 2.2 has come out, you can ignore this step, you will already have it, but if not, do that and then you'll be able to follow along because you need 2.2 or later for this video. Because our combat system is really built on top of gameplay ability system, you need to create some sort of config to tell gameplay ability system what abilities each character should have, what their health should be, what their stamina should be, and all these things. And it all lives inside of the narrative ability configuration, and every character has one of these. So I'm going to start with that. The first thing that I'm going to talk about here is the ability configuration, and every character definition in Narrative Pro has one of these. If you watch the framework video, you'll know what the character definition is. And basically it defines the attributes that a certain character should have, what abilities they should have, and any sort of passive effects that they have. It basically only defines the defaults, so you can still equip a weapon and the weapon can grant you new abilities and things like that, but it's really the defaults for your character. Your player will have an ability configuration, and that will let your player, decide what abilities they have out of the box. In Narrative Pro, your default one comes with the ability to do crouching and, unarmed punch and basic abilities and things like this. In the demo map, the default player definition is what sets up your player, and like I said, every character definition has one. You can see if I scroll to the bottom, there's my player's ability configuration, and if I open it up, this is what it looks like in the engine. It's got all of the default attributes to grant my player, all of the startup effects, and you can see this passive attribute regen. This is basically just your stamina regenerating over time. And then all of the things that my player can do by default, like crouch, sprint, jump. And this means that if I wanted to take the ability to jump away from the player, I can literally just remove that from this list, and then my player would not be able to jump. So you're kind of building your character up out of these building blocks. So you can see this whole list here. If I was to actually play and use the gameplay debugger on myself. We'll talk more about the gameplay debugger later, but you can see here all of those abilities are granted to me, and you can see when I punch, that punch one gets activated. When I jump, that jump one gets activated, and so on. When I press Q, I can do a dodge ability, and that's activating GA dodge. Sprinting activates the GA sprint. But you can see that those are simply defaults. Like if I was to equip a sword, you can see all of a sudden I've got this new ability, attack melee sword 1H. So it's important to note that the ability config just is your default abilities. You can still change them later, for example, when you equip a weapon, or maybe you just want to grant one to the player for some other reason. And the big reason that this is all stored in a configuration is because different types of character need completely different setups, right? Let's say you want to make an ogre, and the ogre has different types of attacks. You can see here, I've got a couple of examples. The ogre has pummel and throw rock as their abilities. Maybe you don't want to give the ogre the ability to jump, or maybe you do. You can set up a configuration just for the ogre and give it all of the things that just the ogre needs. You can define the ogre to have more health, maybe a random amount of health. Maybe it needs a lot of stamina. Maybe the ogre should regenerate health a little bit more slowly. You can see for a more modern game, you could have a soldier ability configuration with shoot rifle and throw grenade as abilities to grant. And basically, what I'm saying here is because it's packed into a little configuration, you could just make different configurations per different character type, essentially. A good example of this is in the demo map, there's this character called Spud, and Spud is essentially just a attack dummy. And for an attack dummy, we needed the attack dummies to have a whole bunch of health, so you can see he has 1,000,000 health. And the way that I gave Spud all that health is inside of Spud's character definition. If you open that up, you can see that he has a special ability configuration called NPC Spud. It's an ability configuration made specially for Spud. And if you open Spud up, you can see he's got mostly the standard stuff, but you can see under NPC attributes, he has some special attributes. And you can see we just take his default health and multiply it by 1,000 basically. And you can see he's got basically just a huge amount of health. That's a really basic example, is just giving someone more health. But I could do anything. I could give Spud the ability to, dodge or fly around or, whatever I wanted, essentially. I can make him regenerate health extremely fast if I wanted, stuff like that. Now, this isn't a Unreal Engine or gameplay ability system guide, but I'm going to give you the basics of gameplay ability system for anyone that doesn't really understand it. So basically, gameplay ability system has this idea of the gameplay effect. A gameplay effect can change an attribute, like the player's health, the player's stamina, literally any attribute the player has. And so it's very good for things like dealing damage, restoring stamina, adding health. It can do other things like trigger visual effects. So imagine I poison an enemy and I deal some damage to him. You might want to apply like a green poison effect to him. So that's the VFX part of it. We'll talk about those later. And it can be instant or duration based. So you could immediately give the player 100 health, or you could give them 5 health every 5 seconds, whatever sort of setup you want. So they can be duration based as well. And normally, you would have to take these gameplay effects and roll all of this out yourself. But because you're a very highly intelligent 4,000 IQ individual, you have decided to use Narrative Pro. Narrative Pro rolls out a whole bunch of examples and sort of systems around this for you. So we have the gameplay effect item, for example. And this is used for things like potions. We have a bunch of demo potions in the demo map, and they do apply gameplay effects. When you drink a stamina potion, it will apply a restore stamina gameplay effect. Normally, you'd have to go and write all that stuff yourself. It just comes with Narrative Pro. Combat abilities are another good example. When I punch someone in Narrative Pro, the reason it hurts them is because I deal a damage gameplay effect to them. Passive effects like restoring stamina over time are also used. We just talked about those. They're in your ability configuration. That's also being driven via a gameplay effect. And you can really kind of get this vibe for Narrative Pro, right? We're really just extending Unreal Engine. We're just building it out for you, essentially. This is why I can dodge around a bunch, and dodging by default drains a little bit of stamina. Of course, you can change that to be whatever you want. But if I was to take a stamina potion and actually consume it in the inventory screen here, you can see that I have more stamina again. So yeah, potions and gameplay effects generally can change really whatever you want. And obviously these are potions. These are just like a demo item. This could be a med kit if you had a more modern game. Gameplay effect items are very generic. You can use them for any sort of game you want. And when I punch Spud here, I'm dealing a damage gameplay effect to Spud. And gameplay effects actually can be relatively complex as well. You can see when I hit Spud here, that attack is actually supposed to do, I believe, 60 damage with the sword, but it only did 39.3 damage because Spud has a bunch of armor on, and that is increasing his armor attribute, which helps him to negate some of the damage. So, you can get pretty granular and pretty complex with this. And even when I hit Spud and he staggers back, that's that sort of VFX that I was talking about earlier. All right, before we kind of get too deep into things, I really want to talk about debugging, because what's the saying? It's like give a man a fish he can eat for a day, teach a man a fish he can eat for a lifetime. I want to teach you guys how to fish in the game development sense. I want to give you guys like the debugging tools to help yourself as much as possible, because at the end of the day, we have a huge amount of customers, and sometimes it's not easy to get to everyone right away. So the more I can help you guys to help yourselves, I think it's kind of a win-win. So let's talk about debugging the ability system and see what's going on with it. The biggest thing that you will want to use is the gameplay debugger. You can press the semicolon key whilst looking at any character. So I'm going to look down at myself and press it. And you can see I've selected myself. It's kind of obvious because you can see there's some text over my head. Kind of shows me that I'm selected. And I can use my numpad keys to select different categories. So if I wanted to see what's going on with my player's abilities, I can press numpad 3 and bring up the abilities display. And I can use the gameplay debugger on anyone. I could look at this character Spud here, and I could press the semicolon key to use the debugger on him. And I can see, okay, here's the ability to punch, here's the ability to do all these things. He's got 40 armor right now. So it's an amazing way to see the state of a character, what's going on with them right now. Narrative Pro extends the gameplay debugger so you can see important things like what the activity component is doing on the NPC right now. What are they trying to do right now? You can see Spud isn't really doing anything. He's just standing around. So I have to stress, learn to use the gameplay debugger. It is so useful, so important. You really need to know how to use this tool. The other thing you need to learn how to use is the console commands. We give you a whole bunch of console commands that help you to see what's going on behind the scenes. If you press the tilde key, you can open up the console command, and a helpful hint with narrative is basically all of our commands start with n dot something. N.gas is probably the most commonly used ones, but there's other ones too. There's like n.camera, n.cmc. Let's imagine you want to know what's going on with the climbing system. You can use ncm climb debug and then 1 to turn the climbing debug on. And now if you try and climb stuff, you can actually see what the climbing system is doing. And this can be super helpful to see. Maybe, you know, it's climbing up something that's invisible when it shouldn't be doing it. This will kind of help you to see that. And these commands can be really, really useful. And of course, you can go back into the console. If you press the up arrow key, it'll show all your previous commands. I'm going to turn the climbing one off. This is a combat video, so I'm going to show you some combat commands here. Again, if you're sort of forgetting these, n dot will show most of them. And n.gas, let's talk about melee. That's a really good one. If you do draw melee traces 1, if I equip a sword, it will actually show you what the sword is doing when it's tracing. This can be really useful. If your sword isn't tracing for some reason, you can figure that out. We'll talk more about this later. This is just sort of showing you the debugging stuff. And it'll show you when you hit something. The draw traces command is great for hit scan type weapons like pistols. And you can see that it draws the hit scan, and it also prints information about what you actually hit. So you can see my bullet hit the landscape. Here it hit a static mesh component, if you see in the top left corner there. And this can be really useful if your weapons are like accidentally hitting an invisible wall or something that they're not supposed to be hitting. That's how you can kind of check for that. Draw combo info is really good for weapons that have sort of combos. So you can see with the sword, it'll print like information about what animation it's selecting to do for the next attack in the combo and so on. And generally you just want to do 1 to turn it on and 0 to turn it off. So if you're ever struggling or you're a little bit in doubt with something, put in n dot whatever and see if there is a command. Sometimes there will be commands to help you out with debugging certain things. And we encourage you to write your own commands. Commands are not some Narrative Pro thing. They are an Unreal Engine feature, so you can totally go ahead and write your own commands. You'll have to look at the docs for Unreal Engine to learn how to do that, but it's not too hard to do and is super duper useful. I also highly recommend using the output log. Often, if you look in here, if something is going wrong, like often there will be like little warnings and things. I honestly wouldn't worry too much about warnings, especially if nothing's going wrong gameplay wise. But if you are seeing that something is going wrong gameplay wise, it's always worth having a look in the log, because often you might be, you might not have something set up correctly, and the log will tell you like, hey, are you seeing something wrong right now? It's probably because you've got this wrong. So it's worth having a look. I wouldn't be religious about fixing every last warning that comes up, but I would more encourage people to use it in addition. It's just another debugging tool. For some reason, Unreal Engine also has one called the message log, so I've actually got 2 different ones. And this can be relatively useful. Things like a map check. If your map is set up in a way that Narrative Pro doesn't like, sometimes errors will be in here. So it's worth checking some of the message log things as well. Again, also a gameplay ability system thing, so it's not really a Narrative Pro thing, but I am going to talk a little bit about gameplay tags. Gameplay tags can be added to the player, and abilities and effects can also kind of own tags. And if you use the gameplay debugger on yourself, you can actually see my player's owned tags, right? My player has the male tag, which is used to kind of identify what form the player is. That could be anything, could be goblin, could be whatever you want. And also state.movement.walking. You can see when I jump into the air, it becomes movement.falling. So own tags are kind of really a good way to figure out what sort of state your character is in. Is probably not a bad way of explaining it. And Narrative gives you a ton of tags that do not come with base gameplay ability systems. So for example, state.invulnerable. If you have that tag, you will not take any damage. And we actually ship an invulnerability potion, which adds that, and we'll talk about that in a second. State.invisible to enemies. If you have that, you will not be aggroed by enemies. Even if they see you, if you have that tag, they will know to not do anything. State.block fast travel. That will block you from being able to fast travel if you have that tag. And then there's other state tags that don't necessarily do anything. They don't have any function on their own, but they can be used as sort of checks. So state.falling and state.walking that I just showed you. State.swimming is another example. It's added to your player while your player is swimming. So you can do certain things like block an attack if you have that swimming tag. So maybe you're not able to punch underwater. You can block the punch from happening if you have state.swimming. Just to actually show you that in game, if I was to jump into a water volume, you can see that I get narrative.state.movement.swimming added to my player. And if I try and punch, it actually doesn't let me punch. That is because if you actually search for the unarmed punch ability and you open it up, you can see that it has, on the side here, a bunch of blocked tags. So you basically won't be able to punch if you have any of these tags, and you can see one of the tags is state.movement.swimming. So basically you cannot punch while you are swimming. Again, this is more of a gameplay ability system feature. This is not a narrative feature, but I thought I'd just throw this in there for any beginners. There are a lot of tags in Narrative Pro, and you can open narrative gameplay tags.cpp to actually see them all, and we try to write really good descriptions to explain what all of the tags actually do. I'm going to show you that invincibility potion because I think it's quite a good example. So I'm going to go get someone to aggro me and start dealing some damage to me. So we'll spawn an enemy here. I've got this archer. He's going to start attacking me. And you can see that if I was to drink this invincibility potion, I no longer take damage. And the reason is, if I actually use the gameplay debugger on myself, you can see I've got state.invulnerable, right? Is added to my character. So my character is temporarily invulnerable because it has that tag on it. And our combat systems will check for that tag. And if you have it, they won't deal damage. And you can see after a certain amount of time, that potion wears off, it removes the tag, and now I can take damage again. So yeah, gameplay tags don't just have to be owned by your player. They can be used really anywhere by anything. We actually use them in our equipment system to identify different slots. So if I was to go into these armor pieces here, if I look at the example chest plate, you can see it equips to the slot.mesh.torso slot. So all of the equipment slots are gameplay tags in Narrative Pro. And this is great for more beginner-based developers because it means it's really easy to add new slots. You just go to slot.mesh, add a new subtag, and if I wanted to add, I don't know, a ring slot or something like that, I could do so by just adding it here in the editor. So it's a pretty beginner-friendly thing as well. Next up, I want to talk about ability inputs. So why is it that when I press the space bar, it makes my player jump? And what if you want to change that? We also have an input menu here. I could remap the space bar to be P. And if I apply that and go back, whenever I press P, that will be the key for jumping now. How does that all work? How is that all set up? I think the input remapping part, I'm going to save for a UI video, but I just want to show you how How do you change that, right? If you wanted spacebar to be something else instead, how do you kind of change those? So if I go into any ability config, let's just go into the players one here. I'll open up player RPG. This is the default one that you have. If I go into, let's use jump as an example. If I open up jump and go into the details panel here, there's actually this input tag, and this input tag identifies what you need to press to jump. You might be wondering, why can't I just select spacebar? Why is it jump? And that's because we need to basically support multiple platforms like gamepads and different things like that. So we instead have a tag, and then we map spacebar and right trigger and whatever to that tag so that we can support multiple input devices. So if you search for input mapping, this is the default ability inputs. Most people will probably just use these. And you can see we actually map the input action to the tag here. Right, so attack is attack, heavy attack, and so on. And then IMC default is actually where the raw like key presses are changed, right? So if you wanted the jump to be a different one, just have to find jump. Here it is here. And I could change it from being spacebar to being some completely different key here if I wanted. This ability inputs is really just an example, you know, ability 1, ability 2, ability 3. This is kind of just an example demo config we give you. You could scrap all of these ability input tags and completely replace them with your whole custom set. And we would really encourage you to do that. There's no reason why you can't do it. Maybe you want to support a new key that we don't really have. You know, you can just add it here, add a new tag, and you're away. Okay, so how do you go about making a new ability? I want to quickly touch on some of the different types of abilities. You can see there is the narrative gameplay ability, and that's kind of the base class for any ability you make in Narrative Pro. And it's basically the exact same as any normal gameplay ability. It's just got a little bit of extra helper code for getting the owning narrative character and different things like that. If you want to make a combat ability, like some sort of attack, you will want to go down and select Narrative Combat Ability. If you're making an interaction ability, like sitting, pulling a lever, or something like that, you want to use the interact ability. We cover that in the framework video. But since we're going to make I think we'll make a combat ability. Let's select that. And actually, there is a blueprint base you need to use. So you want to use that right now. GA Combat Ability Base. Then simply just call it whatever you want. GA My Attack. If you go into your attack, open it up. Activate ability is where you define what the ability does. I'm just going to make the ability print a string. We'll just say custom ability. And you always need to end the ability when you are done. So we're going to call the end ability function, and that will free the ability up so that we can activate it again. Now we're going to go to class defaults and make sure to select a input tag. I'm going to map it to the attack input. So when I click the left mouse button, it should activate this ability. I'm going to compile and save. But the thing is, I need to give that ability we just made to my player. So how do I do that? Well, in CD default player, you can see it selects the RPG ability configuration. So I would just open that up and change punch to my new custom ability that I just made. I actually forget what I called it. GA My Attack. There we go. So if I click on GA My Attack, if I save that and I hit play, instead of doing an unarmed attack when I click, it's going to do my custom attack. So you can see when I click, it's not throwing a punch, it's saying custom ability in the top corner. And now it's really up to me to build out my attack. What do I want it to do? So we've got a relatively simple, attack, but it doesn't do anything. It's certainly not dealing damage to anyone or anything like that. So how do you actually add some logic to your gameplay ability? Well, because we're using combat ability comes with a whole bunch of really useful functionality for creating attacks. Spawning projectiles, doing hit scans and dealing damage if we hit something, stuff like that. So let me show you how to use it. We're going to right click and search for trace. And you can see we have generate target data and get target data. Generate target data will send the target data off to be processed. Usually that will just deal some damage. However, get target data lets you do whatever you want with the resulting target data. So I'm going to use that here. I'm going to keep my print string there. And then I'm going to make some trace data. And this is literally just how far to trace. So let's just do 10,000. And you can do a radius if you want. Why not? Let's do 10. Finally, we have to tell our trace where it should actually start from. To do that, we'll just get the owning character. We'll get the owning controller. And then get the location of the camera by doing get player viewpoint. And then if you just right click on this, you can split it and then you'll just be able to plug those in like that. So all we're saying is basically shoot a ray 10,000 units away from the camera with a distance radius of 10. And we may as well print out the value. So let's do that. We'll just print out the thing that we hit. So we'll just get, and we'll just do that. And then we'll compile and save. And because we're using get target data with trace, we can actually do that command that I showed you guys before, where you can see it's tracing, you can see it's hitting the landscape. If I look at the cube, it says cube. If I look at narrative NPC, it's saying narrative NPC. And if I go to draw traces 1, check it out. You can actually see what it's doing, right? It's actually doing this line trace. So we've basically just made a new attack. The only thing that kind of sucks with it right now is it doesn't actually do any damage when we hit someone. To deal damage to something, we've got some target data and we can just make a gameplay effect and apply it to the target. This is all a little bit complex, this code I'm showing you here, and you don't have to worry about this because we kind of do a lot of the complexity for you. But for anyone that knows their way around gas at this point, you'll see how easy it is to sort of apply damage here. But we have a function that does this for you, apply damage to targets. And let's do 1,000 damage to anyone that we hit. So I'll just type in 1,000. And application tag can be used if you want to apply the damage in different ways, but we don't really care about that. I'm just going to compile. And we'll give this a try here. I'm going to look at this guy, and you can see it's doing not quite 10,000 because of the armor. Like I said, the damage calculation will apply a little bit differently. It's even taking into account the headshot multiplier as well, which is pretty cool. And what you're seeing there, that's actually basically how the pistol and the rifle work. They obviously have an extra step of spawning weapon effects, and they have some animations and stuff, but that's basically how they're set up. If you look at any weapon, for example, the demo pistol, if you search for the demo pistol and open it up, you actually see that it comes with GA firearm pistol. And that might seem all scary because it's like, oh man, that might be really confusing. If you open it up and look at it, it is actually pretty simple. It is using this GA firearm traceability. And if you look at how it actually handles the trace, it basically is doing what we just did, right? Get target data. It's using finalized target data, which is a little bit, it's a different function, but if you actually look in there, it applies the damage. One slight difference that you'll see if you do look in the pistol is that instead of doing what we did, which is to get the player's viewpoint, it's using something called a transform provider. And a transform provider is exactly what it says it is. It literally provides some transform. Some attacks transform starts where your camera is, like the one that we made. But other attack transforms should start from maybe where your player's head is, or different transforms, right? And to get around that, we use the targeting transform provider. So let's use one. They're really easy to use. Before we even make one, just to quickly explain the point of them, obviously this is quite easy if I need to get the camera location, but often getting the transform, the place that the attack should start from, is actually way more complex than that. And there's all sorts of complex transform providers that save you the hassle, basically, of having to like do all this calculation and different things, right? Often you don't actually want to shoot right from the camera. You want to kind of offset it and do different things. And there's a bunch of providers that help you do this. Let's just use one. I think it'll make it a little bit more easy to understand. So I'm just going to put the transform struct pin back together. We can delete our camera code. And if we go to variables, we'll make a transform provider. Go to the variable type and search for targeting And then it's called an instanced targeting transform. Very complex sounding name for not a very complex thing. And you can see there's two options, camera towards focus and weapon towards focus. So often you do want to shoot from the camera towards the focal point. And so we're going to use camera towards focus, drag that in, search for provide. You have to right click on it and split it. And then you should be able to do transform, provide targeting transform. Finally, it needs to know the controller, so you do actually technically need to get the owning controller here. And this will basically do the exact same thing that our code just did. And I know that it seems a little stupid, like why would you add all that in just to save the hassle? But if you look, that targeting transform provider actually adds in a nice little extra, which is that it makes the ray not come right out of the camera, but it actually starts at where your player is. You can't shoot things that are behind you. Like with our previous example, if you tried shooting right now, you would actually hit this enemy, which doesn't really make sense, right? Whereas now it's applying it more correctly. So these transform providers can do pretty complex stuff and save you the hassle of having to do that yourself. A pretty good example is this demo wand item. When I shoot the wand, it actually shoots a fireball out of the wand. So we have to get the transform of the wand, but you don't actually want the rotation of the wand, you want the rotation of the camera. If you actually look at what it does, it's pretty complicated. But if you ever needed to shoot something out of the wand or shoot something out of the weapon, you wouldn't have to do all that complicated stuff. You could just use a transform provider, select weapon towards focus, set it up how you want it, which is we want it to use the sort of weapon visual mesh, and then, yeah, provide the transform and it will do everything. So it's kind of this modular way of just packaging, getting a transform into one little piece of code. Now, when we added that attack, what we did is we went into Player RPG and changed it. I don't actually really want to encourage that. In a real game, you really should make your own default player and you should make your own ability set. You know, I really want to encourage people to make their own stuff instead of just using the demo content. So I want to show you how to do that. So in the content browser, I'm going to make a new game mode because the game mode is where you set up what your player definition should be. So go to narrative game mode and make your own one. I'm going to call this BP, whatever your game's called, you'd want to call it that. I'm just going to say custom game mode. And you should make your own default player. And the easiest way to do that is just to copy paste the default player. Otherwise, you would have to manually input different things. So may as well skip the hassle of doing that. We'll just copy that. And we'll just paste it and rename it to CD custom player. Now go into custom game mode, change the default player to your new custom player. And whenever you use this game mode, it's going to spawn in your new custom player, right? So that's how you swap out the player definition. And if you want to swap out the abilities, let's go to that RPG one, right? We'll copy that and we'll go to the same place we put the custom player and paste it in there. And I'm going to call it custom player abilities. So you guys have just made your own ability configuration, right? Open up your custom player, scroll down, select your new abilities that you made. And now we'll just tell the demo map to use our new custom game mode. Easiest way to do that is just to go into the world settings. So you just have to go to window, world settings, and then when it asks for the game mode, we want to tell it to use that custom one we just made. And now narrative is going to know, okay, we need to use this custom game mode. We need to spawn in your custom player. So it's not using the one that comes with Narrative Pro anymore. It's got your own one and it's got your own abilities. And this is great because if the plugin ever updates, it's not going to overwrite any other changes you make because they're in your own sort of custom ones here. So if I was to open up custom player abilities now and do my attack, let's say, you know, in our game, we don't want the player to be able to jump or something like that. You could delete that from here. You know, you can make whatever modifications you want. Hit play. My player is not able to jump, but I can do my custom attack that I made. Pretty awesome. I could also go into my custom player and change any number of other things about it. Like I could remove all these default items. If you're following this tutorial and you don't have those items, by the way, don't be alarmed. It's just what I had in there at the time. You could also change the player's default attributes by browsing to those attributes, make a copy of them, and we'll just put it in that same folder that I've been making all of my duplicates in. Let's say for some reason in your game, you want the player to have like 10 health or something. Open up your custom one that you made, go to where it sets the max health, and we can remove the default health table and just literally just hard code it to be 10. If that's what you wanted in your game, you could do something like that. And you'll see that this will work basically. If I make sure to select them, I'm just going to call them custom player attributes, just so they have a different name to the ones that come with Narrative Pro. Might get confusing. Go ahead and drag those on there and replace them with the custom ones. So now, when I spawn in, it's going to set my player's attributes to be the custom ones that I've defined, rather than the ones that come with Narrative Pro. If I hit play, and I go into the pause menu, you can see my character has 10 HP. So it successfully applied that. I think sometimes people overestimate how complicated things like the UI are. If I dodge and it shows that sort of stamina bar there, I just want to show you how to change some of the stuff as well. I know it's a combat video, but I guess these bars are kind of combat based. If you search for default gameplay HUD, this is the one that comes up on your screen. And if you look at its graph, it has very little code. It does have some, but you can more or less just copy and paste this. You can create a copy of this. In fact, let's do this. I want to show you that. We're going to copy that. We'll come into that folder we've been copying everything into. I would recommend that you make things a little bit more organized than this, but for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm just going to put it all in the same folder here. You will also need at this stage a custom player controller to go with your custom game mode. So just go to player controller, BP narrative player controller, BP custom player controller, and I'm going to call this custom HUD. So here we're basically switching up the gameplay HUD. Open the custom gameplay HUD up. And let's say in your example, you want to get rid of these bars, or maybe, I don't know, maybe you want to put them above the ammo counter instead of below it or whatever. You can change this however you want, because this is your own custom version now. It's not our one. You can do whatever you like to it. Go into your game mode. Go to player controller and change it to your custom one. So it's now using your custom player controller. And in your custom player controller, you just have to tell it to use the different UI. So if you search for HUD, you can see default gameplay HUD, select custom gameplay HUD. So we're now using our own gameplay HUD. We've successfully swapped it out, basically. If I hit play and I take a weapon, you can see that those attribute bars are actually on top of the ammo counter, whereas usually they're below the ammo counter. And literally you could do things like, let's say you don't want a minimap, just find the minimap, delete it, minimap's gone, your game doesn't need a minimap, that's fine, just delete it, it's gone. Simple. See you later, minimap. Most of these widgets like the minimap are designed so that you can just place them on the HUD and you're just good to go. And for that reason, I could literally just put one on the canvas panel here and make it the size that I want, like 400 by 400. And I could copy paste and make a couple of mini maps, and literally they'll both work basically. They're sort of set up to both just work. I'll hit play. Yeah, no problem. 2 mini maps. Most of the widgets that you can drag into the HUD here are made to kind of work on their own, right? Same things like the ammo counter, these little progress bars and so on. And, you know, we ship a lot of stuff like that just to help you out. So, for example, the attribute bar, if I drag one of those onto the canvas panel, in the top left corner, let's just say I want to display the health. I can go to attribute, select health, attribute max health. I can make it pink if I wanted to, whatever color I desire. I could say health. I can put whatever I want as the attribute text. And if I was to try this out in game, if I hit play, In the top left corner, I've got my sort of custom health bar. So you can put these bars wherever you like, right? 10 out of 10 health in the top corner. I don't really have any way of damaging myself, but you'll have to take my word for it, I suppose. Let's talk about weapon items now. So weapon items are a type of equipable item, and if you want to know more about equipable items, I highly recommend the framework video that we did. But the general setup of a weapon item is it's a type of equipable item, so it specifies a slot that it can be equipped to, but it does a little bit more than your standard equipable, because it also will spawn in a weapon visual and attach the weapon visual to our character. The weapon item contains a lot of the sort of data of the item. The weapon visual contains a lot of the art and visual things that are actually displayed, including the animation overlay layer. And you can watch our video on weapon animations to learn about weapon overlay layers, but basically all it means is, you know, if I equip a pistol, it's going to overlay the pistol layer on top of my character's animations, because obviously if I put a pistol on, I'm supposed to like point the pistol and it's supposed to overlay into my animations and modify them in some way. So that's kind of the setup, and I'll show you guys that in Engine because I think it's a lot better there. To explain how weapons work, we're going to start really slowly and work our way up, because weapons are complicated, but if we take it really slowly, I think we can do them in a way where it'll be very easy to explain them. So let's start with quite a basic weapon. We'll start with a rifle. Rifle's quite a basic weapon. If I go to the demo rifle here in the editor, you can see it's a weapon item. I open it up. You can see it's actually a special type of weapon item called a ranged weapon item. Just has a couple of extra things that ranged weapons sometimes need, like aim FOV and stuff. We won't worry about that. It's not that important. What I want to focus on is just the very basics of how does the rifle spawn in, how does it attach to your player, and so on. And you can see here that it will spawn in a weapon visual rifle and attach it to your player. And if I browse to that and open it up, here it is here. This is the rifle that attaches to your player. And actually I can sort of prove this. If I go to the weapon here, I'll just change the weapon and make it like blue or something. There we go. We can make the stock blue just as an example. So if I make the stock blue, you can see this weapon here isn't blue because that's not actually the weapon visual. But when I put it on, you can see the actual weapon visual that goes on my character has that little blue stock. So you can see, yeah, that's the weapon visual. Now, the rifle knows to attach the weapon visual rifle to your player because it looks in these attachment configs. And there's holster and wield attachment configs. Wield is for when you actually have the weapon in your hands, and holster is for when it's on, you know, your back or on your hip or whatever. If you scroll down, you can see that the rifle can either be equipped to back A or back B slots. So you can't put a rifle on your hip because we haven't set it up that way, but if you wanted to, you could actually make it do that. And you can see back A and back B. If you go up to our holster attachment configs, you can see when it's holstered to the back A slot, it will attach to our character, it will attach to this socket, and it will use this as its offset, basically. And that is how it's attaching to my back. And just to prove that, if I was to put in head as the socket name, I could attach this to my player's head bone. I'll just leave that offset in there at the moment, but more or less what you'll see here is the rifle will attach to my player's head, and there you go. So it's up to you to put a socket or a bone for the rifle to attach to when it's holstered, and usually when a rifle or a sword or what have you is wielded, it will attach to the weapon R bone. Sometimes we will add a little rotation in if the base rotation is off by 90 or whatever, but for the most part, rifle, sword, whatever it is going to attach to the weapon R bone. And the weapon R bone is actually just attached to the hand, but it can offset from the hand. And that's why you can do things like this. If I take a pistol and bash with it, you see that cool animation, how my character is able to throw the pistol up in the air. That's because the weapon R bone can detach from the hand, right? If it couldn't detach from the hand, if I just attach the pistol to my hand R, I couldn't do something cool like that. So the weapon R bone is just a separate bone, and the whole point of it is to let you do animations where the the weapon can fly away from the hand if it needs to. When I zoom into first person, there's actually a second pistol mesh that is attached to my hands. And actually these hands are another separate mesh. And the legs are the same. So when I zoom in, those legs you see on the ground are the same. But when I go into first person, the arms get swapped out for a custom set of arms. It's kind of obvious, actually. You can see the arms are in a slightly different spot, but the legs are in the same spot. And there's a second pistol that attaches to these separate arms as well. We call these hands that you can see the local player mesh. And this pistol you can see in first person is the local pistol mesh. And when you zoom out, you can see this is actually a different pistol. If I open up the pistol visual, you can actually see them here, local weapon mesh and weapon mesh. And I can move the weapon mesh up and you can see, yeah, there actually are two pistols, right? The reason we call this one the local mesh is because other players don't have this mesh. This is a special mesh and special arms that only you get on your game. And if you're playing in a multiplayer game, other players will not have that on their end. Only you have it locally. When you shoot a pistol or a rifle, it needs to do a muzzle flash, it needs to do a bullet hole in the ground and stuff like that. Whereas something like a melee weapon doesn't actually need to have a bullet tracer and stuff like that. So just like there are different types of weapon items, there's different kinds of weapon visual as well with slightly different things in them. You can see that the demo rifle visual, if I was to open it up, it's actually a child of weapon visual firearm. And weapon visual firearm has special logic for just playing gunshots, dropping magazines on the ground, shell ejecting, firearm specific stuff basically that melee weapons don't need, right? Melee weapons don't need a shell eject mesh, obviously. And if you were to go into the weapon visual melee, you would see some stuff in here that the firearms wouldn't need. For example, execution animations are really only something that the melee needs. So there's kind of different varieties of both weapon items and weapon visuals to achieve the effect you need. Finally, how is it that when I equip a pistol or whatever, how is it changing my animations? Now, to really learn about this, I would recommend looking at the video we have on the channel about weapon animations. But the sort of programming side of it, how the data is laid out, is if you look on any weapon visual, like the rifle, if you go into the defaults here, and you have a look for Anim layer, you can see this is the overlay layer that is applied when I put the rifle on. There's also a weapon 1P anim layer if you want to apply a different animation for the local arms as well, those first person ones. You have to remember, because there's two sets of arms and two weapons, there's actually two animation layers that get added, right? There's one for first person and there's one for third person. And you can come into biped, animation, ABP overlays weapons if you want to see how any of the animations are made for different weapons. If you want to know how the bow animations work, you could open up the bow base, look in the overlay. It will always be inside this overlay layer, and you can actually see how it works, right? You can see, here's the third person bow logic, here's the first person logic for the bow. And obviously, you know, you're going to need to be an animation programmer to understand how the weapons animate. But most of the time, you won't actually need to understand how it works, because if you're, you know, a beginner with animation programming and you don't want to write your own stuff, that's why we give you all of these examples. If you want to make your own bow, you don't have to write your own bow overlay stuff. You can just use our one. If you want to make your own pistol or rifle, you can just make a child of the firearm base overlay. And pistol and rifle serve as really good examples. Would actually recommend, if you ever want to make your own custom weapon, come into something like the rifle here and just copy and paste and make your own one. Call it custom rifle and make your own copy and paste of the rifle visual as well. And finally, make your own copy and paste of the rifle overlay here. And that's basically one of the best things about this demo content. It serves as a living example of like how you lay this all out. Let's say you want to add an old musket to your game. Go to the rifle weapon item, copy paste that, rename it to musket, copy paste the weapon visual, rename that to musket, and copy paste the rifle overlay layer and swap in your musket animations, because the musket will be a different size to the rifle, so you will need to make some slightly different animations. And we'd recommend looking at the tutorial we have on that. And you'll basically be able to make different weapons. The other thing you'll notice if you use the gameplay debugger on yourself and pick up a rifle and equip it, is you can see it grants me a whole bunch of abilities. And if you look at the source of them, they're actually granted by the rifle rather than being granted by our player, like the default ones are. So how does that work? Well, if you go into any weapon, like the rifle, for example, and you can see the rifle is really simple. Because it's two-handed, there's only one set of abilities that it can grant you. For dual-wieldable weapons, this gets a little bit trickier, so allow me to show you what that's all about. If I go to the pistol, which is dual-wieldable, if I go down to the weapon hand, you can see instead of being two-handed, it's a dual-wieldable item. So you can have it in either hand. And so there's actually 3 ability sets that you need to fill out. The first set is if I just wield the pistol in both hands. If I do that, I'll get the ability to fire the pistol, aim it, and bash. But if I put a pistol in each hand, the pistols need to grant me different things depending on which hand they're in. Hopefully that makes sense. So like the left-handed pistol will grant me this pistol normal shoot, but the main hand one will give me this special pistol R shoot for shooting the main hand. So I can sort of shoot from the right hand. And even if you're dual wielding pistols, I still grant you the bash. I just do it using the main hand abilities. Obviously, I don't want both hands to grant you bash. I don't need to give the player the ability to bash twice. But it's probably easier to just show you this in the editor here. If I use the debugger on myself and I equip 2 pistols by opening the weapon wheel and clicking one for the offhand and one for the main hand and letting go, I'll get them both out. And if you look at my gameplay abilities, I've got that pistol R that's being granted, and I've got the other pistol, and you can see one of them says demo pistol 0 and the other one says pistol 1. So dual wielding gets pretty tricky. To be honest, dual wielding, you've got to fill out 2 ability sets, but it's doable. If you look in the pistol visual and you go to the Anim section in the details panel, you can see that it has a special animation layer that it applies for if you're dual wielding. Because obviously when you're dual wielding pistols, your character will animate differently to if you are just holding one pistol. If we look at the shield's a good example of an item that only goes in the offhand. In fact, it's the only demo item we have that only goes in the offhand. So you can see when you select offhand, it will only give you the ability to have offhand abilities or standard abilities. In fact, I don't even think the standard abilities matter there. I'm pretty sure it will just always give these offhand ones. And you can see I can take a shield, I can take a dagger, and I can put the shield and the dagger on at the same time. I actually haven't put the dagger in my main hand. I need main hand and offhand. There we go. Works really nicely. Before we keep going, I want to touch on the narrative Anim instance because it's the base class for all of the Anim BPs in Narrative Pro, and it actually is very important to combat. I know a lot of this stuff might seem like I'm kind of going off course a lot, but really, like, you really do need to know how the whole system wraps around combat, and so that's why sometimes it feels like I might be going a little bit off course. I promise you do need to know all this stuff. So the narrative Anim instance has 2 really key parts to it. Override layers, and they're used to override the entire Anim BP. So for example, if I start climbing, it basically doesn't need to play any of my normal Anim BP stuff, right? I don't need to run around anymore. I don't need to be able to jump or anything like that. Climbing is kind of its own unique mode that the player can be in. Same for swimming, for example. And you'll see here I've put that it's character agnostic. What that means, right, is that if I am let's say in your game, you can play as a fox. When a fox jumps into water, it needs to play a different swimming override layer to if a human jumps into water. And it can do that because these are tagged override layers. Basically, the fox has its own set of swimming, climbing. Even if a fox could drive in your game, you could have a special fox driving Anim BP as well. And for combat, the more important one really is the tagged Anim set. And this is similar to an override layer, but instead of being overriding the Anim logic, it's a set of animations. So you can imagine when I get shot, I should flinch, right? I should play a hit react. But if I was a fox or some other animal, if I got shot at, I should play a different flinch animation to if I'm playing as a human character and I get shot at. And these anim sets have the exact same feature. They are character agnostic, right? It will sort of correctly select the right animation for the right character, essentially. You can watch our video on appearances to learn more about that. And that is the sort of core purpose of the tagged anim set and these override layers. And I need to tell you about those because they tie into what I'm going to talk about next, which is gameplay cues. If we were to come into that custom player definition that we made earlier and open up our player's appearance, you can see that the anim BP that we will apply to your player is ABP biped. And there's also a local one called biped arms. That's for your local first-person arms. But if we go back to the biped one, this is your third-person anim BP. And obviously, if you know your stuff with animation programming, you can come in here and see how it works. But really, it can be pretty complex, and we don't really recommend that you modify the base code of this unless you need that and you know what you're doing. But if you go into the edit defaults here, you'll be able to find the tagged anim sets. And actually, here's the override layers too. So you can see swimming maps to the swimming override layer. Driving maps to the driving override layer. And if I had a game where for some reason I could play as a horse and horses could drive around or something, I could have in my horse anim BP a totally different override layer to play if a horse was driving for some reason, right? And it's the same sort of concept with these anim sets, right? Each tag maps to a set of animations, and each character's animation blueprint can provide a whole different set. So in your game, if you can play as a fox, and foxes can attack people, you would have attacks unarmed light. You'd have a special set of attacks for a fox. But these attacks here are for a human. If I open these up, you can see punch left and punch right. These are sort of what we would call biped animations, meaning there's like two legs essentially. But you could just as easily have a quadruped set of animations for different character types as well. And the reason I'm sort of showing you this is because this is how we have different hit react animations for different characters. And this will tie into what we're going to talk about next, which is gameplay cues. So let me show you how we do hit reacts. To tell you about hit reacts, we actually need to tell you about gameplay cues. You might have noticed earlier in the video, I was kind of talking about VFX, visual effects, and in Gameplay Ability System, gameplay cues is how that is handled for you. The gameplay cue is used to add visual effects, and it's usually applied by a gameplay effect, right? If I have a take damage gameplay effect, it will cause the character to hit react, and maybe some blood will come out. If I drink a stamina potion, maybe my character has a green glow applied to them, and so on. And so usually there's a gameplay effect that's applying the gameplay cue. And in narrative, we provide a whole bunch of these gameplay cues for you. Probably the biggest one that you will see is the weapon burst. And we use this for when a firearm shoots. This will handle spawning in the tracer, the shell eject, the bullet hole decal on the wall. It's handled for melee weapons. If a melee weapon, if you hit someone, that will sort of make all the effects happen. If you hit a wall, sparks will go flying. That's all handled by that. It's even handled for things like grenades exploding, or if you hit someone with a punch. Really just one-off burst effects. And that includes spawning in audio, particles, the whole lot. Next up is take damage. This is used for flinching, and we apply this to people that we cause damage on. And you can have different types of these take damage effects, and we have two that come out of the box. You can make your own, but we have a sort of flinch, and we have a stumble as well. And the stumble is used for more heavy attacks, right? Like if I hit someone with a greatsword, they should probably get knocked back, and that's a case where we would use the stumble take damage effect. And you can see here it says use anim sets to correctly select the right flinch for the character type, right? i.e. horse plays a different flinch to human when shot. So that's kind of that tagged anim set that I was talking about before. We also have this idea of overlays, like if you drink a potion, you know, there should be a green glow applied to you. If you get hit by a fireball, maybe your character has an orange glow. If you're poisoned, maybe there's a green glow on you. Obviously, you don't have to use these. They're just kind of example gameplay cues that we've added. Most people will want to use at least these two. Some games, you know, you don't need to use the overlays and so on. So let's jump into the editor and I'll show you how these sort of work. If you've ever installed Narrative, you'll notice we always tell you to move the cues folder from Narrative Pro content and drop it into your main content folder. And that's actually a limitation of Unreal Engine. You have to have this cues folder in your content folder. And this is where all of the cues live, is in this cues folder. If you look at bursts here, you can see there's kind of these different types of bursts. This one's for unarmed punches. This one is more of a generic one. And this one is for weapons. And the reason they're separated out is because weapons, if I shoot someone with a weapon, we grab the weapon visual and we ask the weapon visual to play some effects. So you can see here we grab the weapon visual from your character and then we play the burst using your weapon visual. And basically what that does is the weapon visual has all of the effects in it, has all the audio to play, all that stuff, and it will go off and it will do exactly that, right? Spawn muzzle flash, play fire audio, spawn tracer, play impact audio, all the VFX basically will get spawned in. But if you imagine that I punch someone, well, I don't have a weapon to tell to do that, right? So it's a little bit of a different one. And you can see that the punch uses generic burst. Generic burst is a way to make bursts happen without having a weapon visual, right? So it'll use this thing here, an instanced weapon FX. It's just a way of playing effects when you don't actually have a weapon to play them on, essentially. So hopefully that makes sense. It's kind of similar in usage to that targeting provider thing that I showed you guys before. You kind of click the drop down, select the one you want, and then you can, it's the same thing, right? You select what impacts to spawn and it will do all of it whenever you call that function. So yeah. And that's exactly what burst unarmed does, right? Because when you're unarmed, you don't have a weapon. Instead, it uses generic burst. And then if you look in here, it just plays a basic sort of weapon burst. It'll spawn some blood in or spawn some concrete hit or whatever depending on what surface you hit, right? It'll spawn different effects. Next up, take damage is probably the big one that I think people will want to have a look at here. If you open up take damage, it is relatively complicated, but most of it is actually just checks. There's this function called can flinch, which will make sure you're still alive and stuff like that before we try and make you flinch. But really the big thing that we do is we select the flinch to play. And you remember I talked about those tagged anim sets before. Basically, all we're doing, we're figuring out what direction are you being hit from. That's what this is. And then we use the direction you're hit from to select the right hit. So stumble left, stumble right, stumble back, stumble forward. If you go back to the biped, you can see all these sets here, right? There's a set of animations for when you get hit from the front, from the back, from the left, and from the right. And just to kind of show you that, you can see if I hit Spud from the front, he goes backwards. And if I hit him from this side, he goes forwards, right? And that's because we're correctly selecting the right animation to play based on the angle between me and him. Long story short, for anyone that wants to swap out the animations, if you go into the ABP biped, you could create a child of this because obviously if you change any of these and we update the plugin and you upgrade, it will overwrite it. So try to not change the base code when you can, unless you don't want to upgrade later on. But basically, yeah, you just come in here. Let's say you want to change the hit reacts, right? You want him to stumble with a different animation. I could go into my forward hit reacts, open this up, and literally just swap these out. I mean, it is that simple. We provide like a whole bunch of them that are used from Lyra. And they're additive, which means they get kind of blended on top of whatever your base animations are doing. I won't go too much into additive animations because this is kind of more of a narrative pro tutorial than an animation tutorial. Where it gets a wee bit complex is it can also look in your overlay to check for a hit animation. So you guys know how I said, you know, different characters need different flinches. Well, actually, when you're holding different weapons, you might need different flinches, right? Like if I'm holding a rocket launcher, I might hit react a little bit differently to someone who's not holding a rocket launcher, right? And so it will also have a look in your overlay layer. So if you were to look at any of the overlay layers, like the rifle overlay layer, if I open this up, you can actually see that if I go to the defaults, this has a bunch of tagged anim sets, and you can put tagged anim sets in here, and it will select those over the base ones as well, depending on what your overlay is right now. You can see most of them don't even bother to do that, especially because we have those additive animations. They do work quite well with anything. But I believe the shields tend to use this for blocking animations and stuff, so it can be done. So as you will know if you watch our weapon animations video, the way that we handle weapons in Narrative Pro is we take the base animations of running around and we overlay weapon animations on the upper body. So we're keeping the same lower body animations, but we're layering in some upper body ones. And the way that you control how they get layered in is using animation curves. And this trips up a lot of people, so I want to discuss it. Take that sword overlay that I was just playing on my character when I had my sword equipped. It has this 3P idle that will overlay on top of the base locomotion. And basically we need to sort of tell it how to layer that in, right? How do we want to blend this in? And that's what these curves do. Most of the time, say you're making another one-handed sword and you have different animations you want to use, you would just want to copy the curves from this sword idle that comes with narrative and copy them and paste them onto your animation so that your animation is blended the exact same. But for people that are animation programmers and are a little bit more knowledgeable on that stuff, I'm going to show you what all the curves do now, just in case you need that information. So here's a little write-up on the animation curve reference. And you can see this is in the base Anim BP. This is like the blending logic. And all of these blends are driven by these curves here. And our old animation programmer Liam has gone through and basically done a little bit of a write-up on these. So feel free to pause the video and read about how these different curves work, because they kind of are, they're your way of controlling how something should blend. So I'll just sort of scroll through this. Feel free to pause it if you're interested in these. If you don't really care, I'll show you kind of the hack to not really have to learn these, and I'll sort of show you what I do if I need to quickly throw animations in. Got some additive curves here, local space ones here as well. We have utility layer curves that are used for other things that aren't blending related, such as max rotation error can be useful as well. But if you don't really care to learn what these curves do, that's kind of okay. What I would recommend doing is, if you're putting a new weapon in, this is what happens a lot. People will try and put a new weapon in, a new flinch or whatever, and it won't work. And really what they need to do is put all these curves on. But really, we'd recommend just copy and paste these curves off of something that works and put it on your one. So let's say, for example, that you're making a new pistol and you've got a custom pistol reload montage that you've put in. To get your pistol to reload, go into our pistol reload, copy these curves, and put them on your pistol animation, and it will blend the same way our one does. And that kind of saves you from having to add these curves. Just use these demo assets and copy paste from those. Let's say you're making a new sword and you've got some custom sword animations. Copy from the 1P sword idle. It should be noted that 3P animations are the only ones that need these blending curves, because first person doesn't have this blending thing. So you don't need to put these curves on your first person animations. But, let's say you're making a custom sword. You would want to, if you had a custom idle animation for that, you would want to take these curves from our one and copy and paste them, put them on your one, and it will work the same way that ours is blended. And then from there, if you need to do any extra little tweaking, maybe you don't want to layer the legs or something like that, you can edit the curve, change the values, and it will change how it gets blended. Again, that is a bit more of an advanced feature. I think you probably need to know what you're doing realistically to be messing about with the curves. If you don't know what you're doing, I really recommend just following, copying the curves from the asset that you feel is most similar to what you need and going from there. That's often what I will do if I'm putting new weapons or swords or whatever in. I want to show you how we would generally go about making a new weapon as well. And I really want to say copy and pasting is probably the best way to do it, even for us. If we're making a new, let's say we added the dagger recently into Narrative Pro. I just copy and pasted the sword and I swapped the mesh out. And I want to show you how to do this in case you're actually thinking about adding your own sort of custom weapons. Let's go back into that folder that I put all our custom game mode and stuff like that in. I'm just going to get rid of my custom attack ability for a second because it's blocking my sword from attacking, which is a little bit annoying. So I'll just get rid of that. And let's make a custom sword. So the first thing you want to do is let's use the dagger as a base. So I'll copy the dagger. I'm going to make a new folder. Coolest sword ever. And I'm literally going to paste the dagger in there. And I'm going to say weapon underscore coolest sword. Open it up, and obviously there's going to be a lot of stuff to change. I think initially, first thing I'll do, I'm just going to change the name of it to coolest sword. My cool sword. And so we've made a custom sort of weapon item, and actually this will already work, right? If I was to drag and drop this coolest sword into the level here, you can see it's literally in the level. I can take the sword, coolest sword, I can pick it up, I can equip it, I can go into the weapon wheel, I can put it on. Because I've copy and pasted the dagger, it's got all the same attacks, it's got all the same weapon visual. And let's make a custom weapon visual now as well. So again, we'll just go to the dagger, weapon visual, copy that. I'm going to say demo. I'm going to say coolest sword visual. In here, you could completely swap the art out entirely. I think what I'm going to do in my case is just make it like a different color. Let's just make it blue just to kind of show you guys that. And because there's two weapon meshes, you could make the first person mesh blue and the third person one red, or you could use a lower quality one for third person. You shouldn't need to do that because of LODs and so on. And on all of the melee weapons, there is a melee collider. Basically, for melee weapon collision checks, you have to use a capsule. And you can actually use the sword itself, and it will grab the physics asset off of the sword. But basically, in all cases, we pretty much just use this melee collider. I think this is probably the way to go, in my opinion. Just add a capsule component of some kind. Of course, you don't even need to do that because you're copying and pasting an existing sword because you're smart and you like saving time. So, yeah, the way that you tell narrative, hey, I want to use this capsule for the collision checking, is you just go to override and override get colliding primitives and just plug in the collider. And you could plug in some other colliders if you wanted as well. So I'm going to make the swords both blue. If you want to change the pickup to also be blue, go into your weapon coolest sword, go down to the pickup mesh, and just change that to be blue as well. The mesh will not auto update in the world, but if you just reselect the sword, you can see it's now blue. It's now using our pickup mesh configuration. And yeah, working nice. I can come and take the sword. I'm going to grab the sword. You would probably want to make a custom thumbnail with a blue sword and so on as well. But you can see that that sword... the sword is still showing the old one. That's because in the weapon for our new sword that we made, we still have the old visual. We need to update that to be coolest sword visual. Going to pick up the coolest sword, equip it. You can see the blue sword is on my character. and I can put it on. I can attack with it. If I use the draw melee traces command, my melee traces are showing up. And let's talk a little bit about that as well. So if we open up our coolest sword and we go down to the weapon abilities, you can see that when we are holding the sword in our sort of both hand configuration, right? We don't have anything else equipped with it. It will give us the ability to block, and it will give us this melee sword one-handed. And if we browse to that and open it up, this is the attack that plays when I attack with the one-handed sword. Now, you remember before when we made our custom attack, we used, it was called combat ability base. And this one's using a slightly different one called attack combo melee. And this is actually a different base class you can use, and it's specially made for attacks that need combos. Basically, it handles all of the complex, combo logic. You just give it the combos to play, and it kind of handles it. And it's used for stuff like the swords here. So let's say that your custom sword also needs a set of custom attack animations. How do you go about doing that? So what we're going to do is we're going to take that GA attack melee sword 1H or whatever, and we will simply just copy this, and you guessed it, we're going to do the same thing we've always done, which is create our own version of it. We'll say attack sword 1H cool sword. Open up your coolest sword and give it the cool sword attack instead of the standard melee one. And if you go into your cool sword attack, you can change out the animations to play. You can see they're right here. Default combo animations. We've got sword attack and dual sword attack. That's if you're dual wielding the swords. And actually, it even supports shield attack animations as well. One tiny mistake I made here actually is I duplicated that sword 1H. You actually want to create a child of sword 1H. We can quickly change that, nice and easy. Just go to the parent class here. We'll just do sword 1H and just change it. So yeah, that's all good. We can delete all this stuff here. The reason I don't want to copy paste it, the reason you should make a child class of it instead, is because sword 1H actually has a little bit of logic for grabbing sword and shield animations. So if your coolest sword needed to be used with a shield, that's going to handle that for you. So we don't want to duplicate it. We want to make a child so that it's all there in place doing its thing, basically. So now if we were in our cool sword 1H, we go to the class defaults and we could change them out for any set of attacks that we like. I think I've got some other random ones in here. Let's just select the unarmed attack, melee unarmed. It's a bit of a random example, but I think it will work. So if I take the coolest sword and put the coolest sword on, you can see it plays the unarmed attack, right? I've successfully swapped out the animations that the sword is supposed to play. But if you do want to make your own set from scratch, it's really easy to do. You just want to come to data asset. Again, it's probably better to just copy paste stuff like I've been showing you, but you can make it from scratch. Narrative anim set. I could say my cool sword anims. And in here, you can put your combo animations. And you want to put them in order, so they should be sequential. And of course, because we support first and third person, you can put in your first and third person animations here. And again, I really highly recommend just looking at the examples of ones that we've already set up, right? Here's the one-handed sword combo. If you open that up, you can look inside it and see, okay, we've got these 1p and 3p attacks. And then just input your ones accordingly. And remember that with your 3p attacks and your 1ps, set them up the same way that our ones are set up, right? So when you're setting your 1p ones up, make sure that the slot is set to upper body. When you're setting your 3Ps up, make sure that the slot is set to full body. But it's always worth checking, like, if our ones have some curves. If our ones have curves, copy and paste those over. But actually, I think the melee attacks are fine, because since they're played on the full body, there's no blending, so you actually don't need the curves for those. But if you look at stuff like blocking animations, if you were ever wanting to duplicate those, like I mentioned earlier, make sure to copy paste these, put them on your one, and it will actually blend properly. So the attacks should be quite easy, basically. You don't even need to worry about the curves. Just make sure that these slots are set correctly. 1 piece should be on upper body, and 3 piece should be on full body. The other thing you'll want to do is copy all of the notifiers. These are things that tell the character to do certain things, like here we play some audio. When you hit with your sword, we play a little whoosh sound. You might also want to spawn in a trail and stuff like that. I mean, you don't need all of these. The big ones that you do need, the main one you really need is this one here, the attack animation notify. And this tells the sword when it should trace to see if it hits something. You can see that little window there is where the sword will actually check if it's colliding with an enemy and deal damage. These motion warping windows are where we will kind of aim assist you in a way. We'll sort of move your character, we'll warp your character to a certain destination. It's probably better to just show you this. If I go into the level here, I'm going to put a sword on, and you can see that even though I, attacked from way back there, narrative's kind of helping me, right? It's kind of warping me to the right spot. And those motion warping windows are used to basically define what part of the animation should we move you at. Because if I was to move you here, for example, your feet would slide along the ground. It would look terrible. But because this part of the animation is where you're stepping through the air, it's a great time to warp you through the air because you can hide the warp really well. And in practice, it'll end up looking pretty good. And like the curves, I'd really recommend just copy pasting these all onto your own melee attacks. If you ever want to put your own custom ones in, just copy paste our ones, and that way you know that the everything's going to be configured correctly. I will just quickly touch on why there is 2 motion warps here. The reason that there is 2 is there's one for rotation and there's one for translation. That's because sometimes we want to move you around but not rotate you, and sometimes we want to rotate you but not move you, and so we kind of need 2 so that we can select the right one to do, essentially. A good example is when you're in first person, we actually don't want to rotate you because it would be really jarring. It's really jarring to take the player's camera and rotate it aggressively around, so we only translate you when you're attacking in first person. So yeah, if all of this is a little bit confusing, I really recommend, can't stress this enough, just copy paste the curves if you need a similar thing, and copy paste the animation notify stuff that I showed you here. These are warps and all that good stuff. Just copy that over. You'll also notice that the first person attacks don't have all those notifiers on them, and that's because the third person character is the thing that drives all of the combat. The first person character actually doesn't drive anything. It just is there purely as a visual thing. To show you what I mean, if I was to attack, if you look at my character's feet, this third person animation is not only moving me around, but it's also the thing telling narrative, hey, we want to check if the sword hits something, right? The first person animation is just timed so that it syncs up with the first person animation. And if you look down, you can see your legs are still being driven by that third person animation. And the first person arms are literally there as like a visual thing. They actually don't do anything. It's really my third person sword that's colliding with Spud here and not my first person sword. But it looks pretty convincing. While we're talking about melee, I want to touch on executions. So executions can be kind of carried out for any reason. For example, if I attack someone from like a stealth angle, you can see it does like a special execution animation. It'll also do an execution animation if you strike the fatal blow on an enemy. And I want to talk a little bit about how these work. And also, in case you want to get rid of them or turn them off, we'll talk about some of that stuff as well. Really, the first thing to know is that the executions are stored in the weapon visual for your sword. So if we were to go to weapon visual sword, let's just look at the demo sword. You can see it's got 3 execution animations. I believe execution sequences also are supported. We don't use them in any of the demo content, but Typically, this is how you would want to drive the execution. So contextual animations are an Unreal Engine 5 feature. It basically just means play two animations or even more, like play animations that are kind of relative to each other. And here we're using it with an instigator and a target. There are some good blog posts on the contextual animation, so if you want to know more about it, definitely do some reading up on it. But essentially, we have these assets, and these are the execution assets. They support things like conditions, like only play this execution if, I don't know, I'm in front of the person, otherwise play a different one, and so on. And I'll show you where this all happens. If you look at, you remember I told you guys about GA combo base? You can use that as the base for like combo-based attacks. But there's another one, it's like melee combo base. Melee combo base contains the execution logic. So this is the base for like a melee attack in Narrative Pro, basically. This is the function that handles it. And you can see like when we perform the attack, we like update the combo, and then we find you remember how I was talking about how we sort of aim assist the melee? That's what this is here. It finds the best target, the person that it thinks you're going to hit, and then it will warp towards them. But you'll see here, should execute. If should execute is true, play execution. And should execute will check if the... you can't execute in first person right now because we don't have the animations for it. But it'll make sure that the person's alive. It'll make sure that it's either a fatal blow or a backstab. And if it is, we can play in execution. And long story short, we call this play execution function. It will make you invulnerable for the duration of the execution. Like if I'm executing someone, no one should be able to kill me while that's happening, obviously. And then you can see it grabs the execution animation and it creates a contextual anim scene and plays it. And that's, you'll have to learn about contextual anim scenes to know exactly what's going on there, but basically it's going to play both those animations at the same time. And again, I'd really recommend duplicate one of these executions, throw some of your own custom animations in there, give it a try. I don't think there's too much to lose. If you open these up though, do just remember that you want to add the motion warps to it, and you want to add those like attack windows, just kind of as mentioned previously. If you want to use your own execution animations, just put your own in and just make sure to copy the notifies over so that it works the same. You can see that once the contextual anim scene activates, it'll basically immediately kill the target. And this finalize target data is the function that sends the target data off to the server, and it will eventually be processed by attack combo base. You can see we're also filling out a bunch of hit data manually. This is just so that when you execute someone, the blood comes out of the correct place and so on. Of course, if you don't execute someone, you'll end up just doing this function here, warp and start attack. And this just warps you and then plays the attack animation. And as I mentioned before, the attack animation will have that little window where it does the collision checking. And if it hits something, it will it'll deal the damage. The sort of basics of how that collision check works is when that little anim notify activates and deactivates, it actually ends up calling this function, activate and deactivate in the combo melee here. And basically what this does is it grabs the weapon, right? We have to figure out, because of dual wielding, we need to know what weapon is in what hand and grab the right one. And then we call this function, set weapon collider active. And this basically just looping over and over again will try and see if our collider has hit anything. And it is frame rate independent as well, which is quite cool. So even if you're lagging really badly, it will sub-step through the animation. It's good stuff. It's good stuff. Take my word for it. And if you want to see how that works, of course, you can look at the do melee collision trace. It ends up calling perform collision check, which is a C++ function. And you can see exactly how this works. Basically, it looks at the attack animations and like caches the attack data. So hopefully that gives you guys enough to go on with regards to the executions. And if you wanted to add some executions to your own custom sword that we made, the cool sword, if we go to the coolest sword ever, you can see the executions are right there. Just swap your own ones in and you should be good to go. I'll just quickly touch on blocking here, so I can spawn in an enemy to fight. You should be able to press F to lock on, by the way, and you can see I can block with my sword. It's supported in both first and third person setups. And the idea is basically you'll just take a lot less damage if you're blocking, but it will require that you have some stamina. You'll also notice the edges of my screen are darkened. That's because my stamina is low. That's like a camera effect, basically. So the reason that I don't want to go too into blocking is because blocking's really just an example ability that I've set up. If you go into GA or GE blocking, it's applied to the player by this GA melee block ability. And it's a really simple ability, right? Check that you have enough stamina, apply a blocking effect to your player. That blocking effect literally just adds a tag to you that tells us that you're blocking. And basically, if someone hits you and you have this blocking tag on you, then it will cause them to not deal a large amount of damage. The reason we haven't fleshed out like a really fully featured parry and blocking system is that blocking is quite game specific, right? Lots of games are going to want to do it differently. So we've kind of given you a really basic setup, basic implementation, and it's up to you to modify this to your game's specific needs. If you look at GA attack combo melee, where we actually do all the meleeing, you should see in here on target data ready. You can see applying target data has a little extra logic to check if target is blocking, and if so, process weapon damage differently. So this is how we check if someone's blocking. We see if they have this blocking tag on them. If they do, we still play the weapon burst, which is like the FX stuff. But you can see that we apply this weapon damage blocked, which basically is a version of weapon damage that just deals a lot less damage. Again, I'm kind of falling into this trap, I think, where I'm stepping through the code really granularly. At the end of the day, if you want to modify anything, have a look at the core abilities, gameplay abilities folder. All of the attacks and stuff like that are in here, and you might find they're not actually too bad to read through. I think it would be not a good idea to go too granular on this. And when in doubt, like really have a look at this demo content. If we take the lightning wand, you can see this is basically a melee weapon in the way that it animates, but it does a completely different effect, right? It shoots a raycast instead of doing a melee hit, and that sort of thing is really easy to do. And if you are someone that really wants to, you know, be able to write really complex combat and modify things, the more gameplay ability system you learn, the easier you will find it for sure. Let's quickly put a new crosshair on the screen as well, because I did say earlier that I was going to show you guys how to do crosshairs. So what we'll do is if you search in the content for one of the crosshairs, we'll go to the crosshair default. It's completely fine. I'm going to copy crosshair default. And once again, I'll just put it in my folder where I've got all my custom stuff. I'm going to call it widget blueprint custom crosshair. So swapping out the weapon crosshair is really, really easy. I'm just going to, in this case, I'll just make the crosshair a much bigger version of what it usually is, and I'll make it like red or something. And if we go into our coolest sword ever item, there is a crosshair. We're going to swap it out for our custom crosshair that we made. And that should basically be it. If I take the coolest sword ever and I wield it, you can see I have a custom crosshair just for that weapon. And you can see if you look in the demo content, we've made a custom firearm crosshair, because obviously firearms have, you know, a weapon spread that needs to be shown when you're sort of aiming and different things like that. It even has custom logic, like in first person, it should hide itself completely, right? Because you're aiming down sights. So we encourage you to look at, make your own custom crosshair, but also have a look at some of the custom ones like firearm crosshair. You'll learn a lot by looking through the demo content. You can see the firearm crosshair consists of 4 little crosshair pieces. And there's a little bit of code that will basically move those pieces. That's it. Whilst we are talking about aiming down sights, actually, I want to show you how that works, because I think a lot of people will want to know how to move aim down sights locations. And they'll also want to know how do weapon attachments like the red dot sight modify the aim down sight location. How does that work? Basically, if you look in the firearm weapon visual, because firearms are really the only weapons that have an aim down sights, it lives in here. There's this get local sight transform, and you can see exactly how this works, right? If you have a scope attachment, it will look on your scope attachment for the location of the aim down sights. Otherwise, it'll look on the gun itself, and it uses this like socket ADS name here. And if you look on the SK pistol, for example, you'll see exactly that. There will be something called socket ADS. And if you see it, it's actually perfectly lined up to look down the iron sights. And then as far as like scopes and things like that, if you look at the red dot sight, if we open that up, it'll have the exact same thing. If you go to the socket manager, socket ADS, as long as you have a socket called socket ADS, that will allow you to define the aim down sights. And once again, I know I keep saying this over and over again, use the demo content, right? If you want to make a scope, just copy and paste the red dot sight and swap out the mesh, you know, and put your socket or whatever. It's going to be a lot easier than setting everything up from scratch. And it really is how we develop content a lot of the time. We also use first-person rendering. The kind of idea with this is it stops your weapon from going into walls, which is a really common problem that you might have in a game. In the settings, you can actually come in here and go to video, and you can actually change your weapon FOV independently of your camera FOV. Thanks to this option, you can see now my sword's rendering at a much lower FOV. You can look in the player camera manager to see how we kind of toggle first person on, and sometimes we disable first person rendering where it's not required using a tag. If you want to have a look at it, it's in the player camera manager. It's not really that complex. There's like 125 lines of relatively straightforward code in here. The next thing I want to talk about is ammo. And there are two types of ammo in Narrative Pro, equipable and non-equipable ammo. You can use either or a mixture of both in your game. And we sort of do this because we really want to give people flexibility to create the sorts of ammo that they want. So if I have a pistol, for example, here, and I take a bunch of this demo pistol ammo, the pistol ammo is an example of a non-equipable ammo type. So I don't have to click on the ammo and equip it. As long as it's in my inventory, it'll just use it. And so if you're creating like a Call of Duty style game, you can not show this inventory to the player, add the ammo to the player's inventory, and it'll work exactly in that sort of classic FPS game way. But, you know, you might want the player to be able to equip different kinds of ammo. Maybe they can equip an FMJ type of ammo and it changes how the weapon shoots and so on. And this is actually exactly how bow ammo works, right? Bows have equipable ammo. If I put on a bow, you can see that I have 50 iron arrows and they actually show up in the quiver. It's kind of a cool feature that we added. But if I picked up some of these explosive arrows, for example, I can click on them and equip them, and you can actually see in my ammo slot here, I have the arrows equipped. Pretty awesome. I like the explosive arrows a lot. The sort of big difference between the two and how they work is obviously equipable ammo, the player needs to click on it and select it and start using it. Whereas non-equipable ammo, when you shoot your weapon, it will just find the first ammo of the type and sort of load it into the gun. It's kind of handled in the background. Whereas equipable ammo, it's more of a conscious choice, right? Your player needs to actually equip it onto them, and it lets them sort of have more flexibility, but, you know, it might not be exactly what you want, which is why we offer different ways of doing it. In order to make a equipable ammo type, if you look at something like iron arrow, for example, you can see it extends this arrow base. So basically, to make an equipable ammo type, just make your ammo have equipable item as its parent class. That's all you have to do. And if you're in doubt, just follow what we have done for arrow base. You could just copy the setup of arrow base. Items like bows and pistols and so on, if you actually look inside of the demo bow item, it will have its ammo here. So you can see required ammo is arrow base, right? So Basically, to use this bow, you need to have arrow base as the ammo item. If you search in the details here for ammo, you'll actually see a bunch of ammo related stuff. Like a really cool option is bots consume ammo. Obviously, you know, NPCs, you might only have 10 arrows on them or something. Often you don't want them to run out of ammo. So if you leave that unchecked, bots will actually not use up ammo. And this is how a lot of games like Skyrim allow bots to shoot arrows forever. You can see the bow has a clip size of 1, which kind of makes sense for a bow. Doesn't really have a magazine to shoot through, it just has 1 arrow at a time. If I was to come to the pistol on the other hand and open the pistol up, you'll notice that the pistol doesn't actually have an equipable item for its ammo. It has ammo pistol, and if I browse to ammo pistol and open it up, you can see it's actually an ammo item, which is basically just a standard item. It's not equipable. If I wanted to make the pistol have equipable ammo, all I would have to do is go to the class settings, and instead of making it an ammo item, I would just need to make it an equipable item. And you would have to make sure that it has a slot. If you go down, you can see it needs to be equipping to the mesh.ammo slot. That's basically it. You could make a pistol with actual equipable ammo if you want. The other thing I quickly want to touch on actually is the ammo fragment. This is quite useful because often different ammos want to change how a weapon shoots, and this is kind of how they do it. They add this ammo fragment. So you can see inside of the arrow base, we don't really have anything in here, but if you look at something like the explosive arrow, I'll just open up the explosive arrow. If you look at its fragment, it actually has a projectile class, bow arrow explosive. So you can see here, it's overriding what projectile we shoot, basically. It's spawning a different explosive projectile, basically. If you look at the dark arrow, if you go into the dark arrow, you can see it actually has a similar setup, but you can see under damage effect, it does weapon damage dark arrow. And if you haven't tried the dark arrows out, they basically just apply a sort of duration-based gameplay effect. I'll just show you that. We'll put a bow on and some dark arrows. I'll have to equip them first. Dark arrow, we'll put those on. And you'll see here, it applies a completely different effect, right? It applies that initial damage, but with some poison on top. Something really important that I want to quickly mention is, I talked about ammo earlier, and I talked about how certain arrows can have like overrides and effects and things like that. I want to make it clear, this is not a like really fixed system where you have to do it our way. Really, I'll kind of give you some examples. So shooting, for example, if you want to make an attack that doesn't need ammo, you can do that because your ability can just not check the ammo. It can just do its thing. But if you need an attack that does require ammo, you can check that the gun has ammo. And it's kind of the same with these arrows over here. You know, these arrows can override the effect to apply to something you hit. But if you don't want that, you don't need to put that in your ability. Ultimately, it's up to the ability to do what it wants with the ammo and so on. And I'll just sort of take you through here. Like if I was to put a rifle on, right? The rifle shoot ability needs me to have ammo. I will not be able to shoot, but I can do a weapon bash. And the reason I can do a weapon bash is because the weapon bash ability that I'm activating here, it is not checking if I have ammo. So things like ammo, things like override projectile, override effects and things like this, they're opt-in, right? That you don't have to make your attacks based around them. And I'll just show you what I mean for the bow as well. So with the bow, if I was to put the bow on and I was to attack with it, if you use the debugger on yourself, you can see that it uses this GA attack bow. That's the name of the ability. So you can go, okay, I'm going to search for GA attack bow. I'm going to open it up and you'll be really surprised. I actually think a beginner could read this. If you have some basic blueprint knowledge, you could actually follow this through. It's not that bad, right? Check if we have the cost to activate the ability, grab the bow, grab the bow's ammo, check if we have some ammo, apply a draw gameplay effect for pulling back the bowstring or whatever. Wait until we actually grab the arrow, put it in the clip here. Wait until we release the mouse button or whatever to release the arrow. And then there's a little bit of a delay here to make sure you hold it for the right amount of time. Spawn the projectile, consume the ammo from the clip. It's actually not that bad. I do encourage you guys, have a go, try and read it. But to my point, how I was saying how the arrow can opt in or whatever, the ability can opt in to do what it wants. If I look at get arrow projectile class, check it out. It's going to grab our bow's ammo. It's going to look for that ammo fragment, and it's going to see if it has a projectile class set. And if it is, it'll use that instead. And that's exactly how certain arrows are able to override the certain arrow that gets shot out of the bow. It's by looking for that fragment. So what I'm trying to emphasize here is that the abilities are relatively loose, right? If I didn't want my bow to be able to shoot different types of arrows, I could not have this logic here, you know. So we kind of try and have this pattern of the ability opts into the thing that it wants to do. If you're wondering how the dark arrow was able to apply that extra effect, it's the same thing as how we spawn a different projectile, right? If you look at this projectile effect specs, this is the effects to apply to someone that the projectile hits. If you actually look at it, we basically look on our ammo for the damage to apply. It's the same thing we did with the projectile, and the dark arrow does have an override set, and so we'll add that into our effects to apply. We also have this one here, which is applying poison to arrows, because arrows are poisonable as well. So really, I guess what I'm trying to stress is it's an opt-in thing. The ability can really do whatever it wants, but we try to not force people to apply a poison. If you don't want to apply a poison, just don't do the sort of logic that we're doing here. Same goes for something like weapon spread, right? I could just plug this in and arrows would shoot straight every time. But we give you this little helper function, which will add spread into the targeting transform of the bow. And you can call this, you can not call this. It's completely up to the ability, right? Sometimes an ability wants spread, sometimes not. And if you open it up, you can see it just grabs the spread on the weapon and just applies it to the transform. Ultimately, your best debugging tool is going to be able to pick up a weapon that you want to learn, use the gameplay debugger on yourself. You can see it's got this attack melee sword 1H. I can search for attack melee sword 1H. I can open it up and I can learn how this attack works. And I want to take you through some code. I know I kind of talked about not wanting to do code, but I'm gonna sort of speed run it a little bit because I want to explain how the melee combo attacks work. I think I didn't really explain this in depth enough. It's worth noting it's not just the swords that use this combo attack ability. Things like the wands do as well. If I take this lightning wand, you can see it uses the same sort of effect here as well. So I am going to step through how combo attacks work, because I think it's not too hard. I'm going to speed run it, give the people who need that. If you don't want it, you can feel free to skip this little part. So the entry point for all abilities is activate ability. So whenever you start a combo attack, it's going to grab your weapon. It's going to wait for you to release, because we kind of support the concept of like a heavy attack. And then it ends up calling this function. This will call perform attack. You can override this function and make it do what you want. But by default, it will update our combo, which what that means is get the combo and then get the next attack in the combo. So basically all it does is it just loops over all of the attacks in the combo over and over and over again. If you haven't attacked in a while, it'll reset the combo as well. So it's got a little bit of functionality for that sort of thing as well. Once it's figured out what the next attack in the combo is, it will play the attack animation. It's that simple. When the attack animation starts, if you look at start attack animation, it plays the attack animation and then it waits. You can see bind attack animation events. This will make us wait for attack.activate and attack.deactivate. And that is the notify that I showed you guys earlier. If you look at any attacks 3P, you remember that little notify I showed you where it sort of turns the weapon collider on or off? If you click on this here, you can see attack.activate and attack.deactivate. So the attack animation, the combo animation, it defines when it should sort of turn on or off. When it turns on, we will get animation event activate, and when it turns off, we will get deactivate. We will also wait for a hit target. So we can wait for an event to come through called hit target. And if that happens, we will call on hit target, which will usually deal some damage. And event activate and event deactivate are kind of loose, right? You can kind of do whatever you want on activate or deactivate. Like a melee weapon will turn the collider on activate and turn it off on deactivate. But maybe you have a wand, it just shoots a projectile on activate and it doesn't need to do anything on deactivate. So these are just kind of loose events. You can do stuff in them or not. It's up to you. If you look at the combo melee and you go into its activate, you will see it turns the sword collider on and turns it off again. I will quickly touch on applying poisons to swords and applying poisons to arrows as well. It's a good chance for us to touch on the poisonable fragment. So basically, if I take a weapon poison here and I was to click on it, certain items can be used on other items. And I can use the poison on any item that has a poisonable fragment. So an arrow, I could poison an arrow. I could poison one of my swords here. In fact, let's do that. Let's poison this sword. You can see it says you apply the poison to the weapon. And if I was to attack Spud here, I might actually have it on the wrong sword. Let's put this one on. There we go. You can see it applies the poison on top of the standard effect. Again, it's an opt-in thing, like I mentioned before. So if you make an attack and you don't want the attack to calculate the poison or apply poison, you could do that. You could totally skip the poison effect. You could say for the sword, maybe your sword has like a lightning cast ability or something, and you don't want that to apply the poison. Just don't do it, right? And for the melee attack, if you do want it to apply the poison, grab the sword, grab the poisonable fragment, and see if it has the poison on it. The other thing that I want to talk about is actually shooting projectiles. So I showed you how to make an ability earlier on that does like a hit scan and deals some damage to someone if we hit them. And I took it off before, so I'm just going to put it back on. If you took yours off, just make sure to put your My Attack back on, because I'm going to show you here how to change My Attack to spawn a projectile. So if I was to shoot with My Attack, you can see it still works. But I'm going to make it spawn a projectile now. So let me show you how to do that. Let's open up My Attack. And you can see we are getting the target data using the trace. I'm going to write a completely different ability now. We'll just unhook that. And I'm going to do spawn projectile. And we'll plug in the same transform. Doesn't really need to change for that. And you want to select the projectile to spawn. We actually have a bunch in here. Let's just do a magic fireball, because I know that one will kind of work. You can look at all of these demo projectiles and feel free to copy paste and create your own. Often we'll have a projectile that's quite similar to what you might already want. And you can do some pretty crazy things, like the arrow projectiles. You can pick them up once you shoot them because they have interaction components on them and stuff. So you can go pretty crazy with them. But yeah, let's just do a magic fireball because that's a relatively simple demo one. And it has this thing called intended location, so you can actually make the missile kind of home towards certain targets and so on. This is more used for bots, and if you want to see this in action, go and look at any of the projectile-based attacks, and you can see how we use this. The bow is a really good one. If you look at the bow, this will use these, and what it means is that bots and NPCs can lead their shots in front of the player, which can be really useful. Now, for anyone familiar with gameplay ability system, this is a effect spec. So basically the projectile needs some sort of effect to apply to whatever it hits. Usually this would be damage or something like that. And for anyone that's familiar with gameplay ability system, you'll know that you can do this like make outgoing gameplay effect spec, and that'll work really nicely. There's also this one, it's called make default weapon damage effect spec. This comes with Narrative Pro, and you can just plug in weapon damage. We could do 50 damage, something like that. And then when it is destroyed, we could just end the ability, or on target data as well. On target data is when the projectile hits something, it can generate target data. And you might be wondering, why do we give the projectile the effect to apply? Why don't we do it this way, where it generates target data, and then we do something with the target data? You actually can do this. You could actually take this and plug this in and do it this way as well. But there's a little bit of a troublesome thing about projectiles, which is that imagine you shoot a projectile. The projectile needs to hit something before you can apply the damage and end the ability. But you won't be able to shoot another projectile until the ability ends, right? Otherwise it'll restart the ability, and it can become quite a painful thing because you have to re-trigger the ability. You've got multiple projectiles. They're all waiting for target data. It gets quite confusing, right? So instead, we kind of give the responsibility of handling the data to the projectile. That way, you could shoot like 3 projectiles and they could all be in the air at the same time, and you wouldn't need 3 instances of this ability to be running. Hopefully that makes sense. This isn't a problem with stuff like bullets, because bullets instantly deal the damage and then you can reactivate the ability. Like, there's no way to have 3 bullets shooting at the same time because that happens instantly, but with projectiles that is not so. So we use this sort of mechanism. There's nothing stopping you from doing it this way, but you kind of need to be a little bit mindful about having multiple running at the same time. Anyways, I'm going to try this out. We will compile and save this. And if you try this now, when you shoot, you can see that it fires the projectile. Because of how my targeting provider's set up, I can actually hit myself. And actually, this is a great example of what I was talking of. You know how I said before that you can't shoot another projectile until the ability ends, right? You can't have multiple of this running at the same time. And that's kind of why we let the projectile deal the damage. If you want it to allow you to shoot multiple projectiles, all you need to do is immediately end the ability. And you can safely end the ability immediately because the projectile's handling this, right? If we didn't have this projectile handling it mechanism, you'd have to do this. But you couldn't do this because the ability would have ended already. So hopefully that makes sense. And you can see now, if you hit play, your projectile firing ability, you'll be able to spam it. You can shoot as many of these as you like. So what if you want to make your My attack into more of an animation-based thing, where your character plays a attack animation, and then at the right time we cast the spell? Let's go to class settings, and we'll change to a combo ability base. GA attack combo base. When you change your attack from a ability base to a combo base, in the defaults, you'll now have some new options. You can see default combo animations is the big one. And I'm just going to use the sword one-handed attack because I think it's like quite a good generic attack. Now that we're using the combo, we actually don't want to use activate ability. You do not want that anymore. We're actually going to use the animation event activate. Right? When that notify kicks off, that's when we want to spawn our projectile. So check this out, guys. We're going to compile and save here. You can see how easy this is. When I attack, check that out. I really need to change my targeting provider. That's so funny. I can hit my player with the projectile. Probably not intentional. Pretty awesome though. Let's change where the projectile spawns from so that I can't hit myself with it. So you can see that because I'm using that camera towards focus, it isn't spawning it far enough from my player. So I could change this. I could use weapon towards focus, and I can use my wand as the spawn point. But you can also choose to not use your weapon visual mesh, right? You could use the player's hand, for example. I think the problem with the hand is going to be quite similar though. I think, unfortunately, it's going to collide with my player when it spawns, but we could try the hand. Oh, there you go. For a wand cast, something like this, I would probably make another set of animations because you can see I still have that sword particle effect spawning, which you probably don't want. And because the fireball has a explosive effect set up on it, this will actually deal damage to the enemies here. Prior attack out in first person. Works pretty good actually, surprisingly. And I want to give you guys a little challenge if you're watching this yourselves. Make it so that your coolest sword grants you this attack instead of you doing it yourself. I want to challenge you guys to try and do that on your own, but I'll give you the answer. So if you can't figure it out, pause the video, try it out. If you can't figure it out, resume and I'll show you how to do it. Alright, if you couldn't figure it out, if you go into the custom player abilities, you can see that we're granting that attack as one of our default abilities, right? What we want to do is remove it from that, go into our coolest sword ever, open our coolest sword ever up, and grant my attack when I equip the coolest sword ever. And then we will not have the attack until we equip the sword, and then we'll have the attack. If I try the attack, it doesn't work because I don't have the attack. If I equip the coolest sword, I still won't have the attack until I actually wield it, which is correct. Ah, it's awesome. So cool. The reason you're hearing little sword dings when I hit someone is because the projectile is asking my sword to play the effect, because that's how the magic fireball is set up. If you didn't want that, you could spawn your own. You can make your own projectile that isn't that magic fireball one. I was just kind of using that one as an example. Basically, if you look inside the weapon projectile base, which is like the base class for all of the projectiles, you can either use that like instanced FX that I was talking about earlier, where you don't need to have a weapon visual. And if you have that, it'll do that. And if you have a weapon visual, it'll use that. And that magic fireball has the weapon visual option turned on. So it's going to ask the weapon visual to spawn the impacts. You wouldn't want that for this attack. So let me show you how to make your own projectile so we don't have to use that fireball one, because that's sort of set up to work with the fireball wand. In order to do that, I'm going to just search for that magic fireball weapon projectile. I will just copy it. I'll paste it into our little folder. So we're just going to make our own custom projectile. We'll just call this my attack. If you open it up, you can change the art as well. Like perhaps you're not a big fan of the cube, which looks a bit stupid. You could swap that out. But in our case, we want to add some effects so that the cube blows up rather than asking our sword to play its effects, which is making that stupid ding sound. So we'll go to the weapon effects here. We're going to go to weapon effects base. If you expand the sections here, you can choose like what it will do. Impact audio, all that sort of stuff. So let's go in here and we'll put in some explosion effects. I think we have a explosion in the plugin. Yeah, we have a lot of really helpful assets like explosion sounds. We could plug those in. We have a explosion particle effect, I believe. If you search for NS underscore, we do include a bunch of good ones with the plugin to help you out. So NS fire projectile impact, that should be quite good. We'll just use that for all of the impact surfaces. We're going to compile and save. We'll go back into my attack and make sure to change that projectile out to our new projectile that we've made. I might even change the color of it just to show you guys that this is actually working. We can make it a pyramid. If you don't see the pyramid, just make sure to turn engine content on there. And let's try it out. We're going to equip our coolest sword. We're going to put it on and we're going to shoot our projectile. Bam! And you can see it's got the explosion, working really nicely. There's one more bug in this attack though that you can see here actually. And the bug that you can see is it doesn't ever iterate to the next attack in the combo. And I wasn't planning on this to happen, but it's kind of perfect that it has happened, because you guys are going to have bugs and you're going to need to know how to debug them. So let's have a look at how we can debug our combo not working. You remember earlier how I said about the console commands. There's this one here, draw combo info 1. If you turn that on, watch what happens. When I attack, you can see it says time since last attack, 42 out of 1, 44 out of 1, 45 out of 1. Basically what you can see is the time since last attack is just not resetting. And you can actually see it's saying combo reset, new combo is 0, right? It just keeps selecting attack 0 instead of moving on to attack 1, the next attack. So our little combo timer is not resetting here, so let's fix that. So I think what we're doing wrong, game development can be hard sometimes. I think we just don't want to end the ability. And the reason is because the combo base ability has logic to end it when the attack finishes. And I think that is the time that it updates the combo, and so because we were ending it, it wasn't able to do that. So sometimes bugs can be a little bit tricky. I think that's a good example of one. Let's see if that fixed it. We'll just go and grab our sword. And there you go. You can see it successfully updating the timer. So on the combo, you don't want to do that. That's probably a good example of a bug that if you had it, try debug it, but, you'd probably want to ask us if in the Discord chat, see if we can help you on it, because that was a pretty confusing bug, to be honest. But it is a good example of why you should try these debugging commands, because at least, even if you didn't know how to fix it, you'd at least immediately know the problem, which is, these time since last attack numbers are just completely wrong. Something's going wrong there. Yeah. Let's try our attack out in first person as well. Boom! Looking pretty nice, actually. I wasn't really intending to, but we kind of ended up just making this wand. It's kind of just a wand that we made. Pretty cool. In fact, if you removed the block from the sword, that would be a cool idea, actually. Maybe I'll let you guys try it, see if you can figure that one out. Remove the block from the alt attack on the sword and make it a melee. And that way you'll make a custom sword where if you left click, it shoots a projectile. And if you right click, it'll melee instead of block. See if you can replace the block with a melee. All right, I'm going to show you guys how to do that. Just in case you do want to have a sword where you can shoot a spell with one key and attack with the other one. So we'll right click, we'll make a new type of attack. So if you search for that melee sword one hand, I'm going to basically just make a child of that. But I'm going to call it Alt 1H attack. This is because I need to make a child so that I can go into the defaults and change it so it's the right mouse button instead of the left mouse button. Because you can see it uses input.attack, which is the left mouse button. We want to make it Alt attack, which is the right mouse button, right? So we're going to do that. And then what that will let us do is if we go into our weapon coolest sword that we made, just go to Alt attack and plug that in. So not only does this custom sword grant us my attack, the cool projectile attack we made, it's also going to grant us this Alt 1H attack, which is the same as the 1H attack, but it just uses the right mouse button instead of the left mouse button. That's all we changed. So we'll try that out. I'm going to pick up the coolest sword. If I right click, we do a melee, and if I left click, we shoot a projectile. Probably need to turn the explosion radius down on that. If you, yeah, projectiles can have an explosion radius. Narrative supports the idea of explosions. I think if you want to know more about this, if you want to change the explosion settings, it's in the details here. You can search for detonate radius. You can change this. With some of these more complex things like explosions, have a look in narrative weapon projectile base and read the source code, because there's really not that much here, and it'll tell you everything you need to know. So yeah. That's it. We've made a sword. We've made a couple of attacks. I think it's probably time to talk about bots and AI. I can't believe it. We're like 2 hours in here. We have not talked about bots and bot fighting and NPCs. So let's talk about that. All right. So it's time to talk about NPCs, AI, having NPCs fight you. And I think the first thing I would say is check out our NPCs and AI tutorial on the channel, because that really covers a huge amount of stuff that it would be pretty ideal to know before you start messing about with NPC combat and fighting and so on. So I'm going to assume that you have watched that, because this video is already going super long, so I don't want to explain too much about the core NPC stuff, more the combat stuff. The first thing that I want to talk about is factions. Factions define who is friendly with each other, who is an enemy of each other, who is neutral with each other, and so on. And if we go into that folder where we made our custom player definition, you can see there's this little factions section. And you can actually put your player in as many factions as you want. And there's kind of like some default ones. Bandits, heroes, and you can be in more than one faction, right? I could be in the bandits and the heroes at the same time if I want to. There's also these ones, friendly all, hostile others. These are kind of special ones. So friendly all should be obvious. If you have it, you'll be friendly to everyone. Hostile all, you'll be hostile to everyone. And hostile others, you'll be hostile to everyone, except for people that also have hostile others. So it's kind of a way to stop. Yeah, imagine you spawn in 3 guys with hostile others. You don't want them to all start attacking each other. So, and if you put hostile all, they would start doing that. So hostile others is kind of a nice way to stop that happening. So just for this example, let's go into our custom player we made, and let's put our player in the heroes faction. And this little archer combatant over here in the back area of the demo map, This button is set up to spawn a bandit archer, and if you click on that spawn and you open up this NPC, the bandit archer, you can see that the bandit archer is in factions.bandits. So if you actually look in the game state, this is where all of the factions are kind of kept track of, who is an enemy of who and so on. And you can actually see by default in the demo sort of game state here, the bandits are actually hostile to the heroes. What that means is, when I spawn in the archer should start attacking me. So let's try that out. If I hit play, press the push button, you can see he immediately starts trying to attack me because we are in opposing factions, essentially. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put myself in no factions. So I'll just remove all of my factions here. Just remove everything. And if I was to press the button this time, the bandit is not going to attack me. And that's because the bandit will be neutral to me. And that's because the bandit is not in any opposing factions. In fact, since I don't have a faction, the bandit kind of has to be neutral to me. Now, when he sees me, he's going to say, oh, okay, I'm neutral, don't attack. But there are certain rules, like if someone's neutral and they attack someone else that's neutral, the bandit should start attacking back. That actually makes sense, right? So you'll see that if I punch the bandit archer, I think I removed my punch ability. I'll just quickly grab my coolest sword item so that I can actually attack this guy and show you what I mean here. So let's run up to him. Let's attack him. He's going to start fighting me now. Even though we're neutral, he's temporarily treating me like an enemy because I'm a neutral who's just attacked him. So it makes sense for him to actually attack me back. What I want to show you here, though, something that's pretty cool, is if I make myself a bandit, I should be able to hit him, and he shouldn't hit me back. And that's because I'm friendly to the bandit, right? And because I'm friendly to the bandit, even if I hit him, he shouldn't attack me back, right? We're kind of on the same team, if you will. My example is working a little bit too well because some of the heroes have decided that they should kill me because I'm a bandit, which I totally did not think about. Oh dear. We'll try this again. We're going to put my sword in this time. And I'll just show you that because me and the bandit are friendly with each other, I should be able to take the sword here. I should be able to attack the bandit. The bandit is not going to attack me back. And in fact, because I have friendly fire turned on in the project settings, I can't even damage him. It's not even going to deal any damage. If you look in the output log, you'll actually see it saying that too. Narrative player gasp, shot NPC, but cancelling since they're same team. Now, factions are not set in stone. They are actually updatable. And not only that, but they will be saved to disk. So let me show you what I mean by that. I think we actually have a little demo developer button that you can place in the level that updates your faction, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, narrative demo button set faction. So this is like a little demo button that I wanted to show you guys. Basically, you select the demo button, and you can select any faction to be any attitude towards anyone else. So let's change the bandits to actually be friendly towards the heroes when I press the button here. I'll go into my player definition. I'm going to put myself in the heroes faction, and because the bandits don't like the heroes, they will start attacking me. But if I press this button, the bandit should stop attacking me. So let's see if that works. We're going to press the button. He starts attacking me. I press this button. And all of a sudden, he doesn't care anymore. He's not bothered by me because we've changed the factions, right? The attitudes have changed. The bandits are no longer enemies of this faction anymore. And faction affiliations are also saved to disk. So if I was to actually save my game and come back into the game, I could actually load my game back in. If I respawn him again, he's still not attacking me, right? Because narrative kind of remembers, you updated the factions in your last save, and those are saved to disk, so he's still not going to attack you, right? And this can be really nice for, like, quests. Imagine you do a quest, and during the quest, the bandits actually do become friendly with the heroes or whatever, and the quest should change the faction when the quest completes. That'll all be saved, and so you can have things like that in your game as well. You can have factions that kind of change alliances. And you can change factions at any time for any reason. In fact, if you look at the button here, the set faction button, all it does is when you press it, it gets the game mode and it updates how the source feels about the target faction. And it also does the same for the target towards the source. I believe that the faction attitudes are two-way. So if you update one, the other will be updated. But I think I just wanted to keep it on the safe side here and make sure it was definitely updating. So that's why I'm doing both there. So that's kind of factions. And it's not just characters that have factions. Anything could have a faction, right? You could make it so that this button had a faction. You simply have to add the team interface to any actor that needs to be able to have some sort of faction. Interfaces, narrative team agent interface. I can make this button have a faction. I think it's a C++ interface right now, unfortunately. So I think you have to implement it in C++. If you want to see an example of it being implemented in C++, you can just look at, for example, the narrative NPC character. And you can see it has the... it's actually the base character that has the, here you go, team agent interface. It's on there. And you just override this get factions function, and this will allow anything to have factions on it. And it's very rare you'd want to add factions to other stuff, but if you do want to do it, that's how you do it. So you might be wondering, how is it that the NPC does attack you if you're in the enemy faction? How does that even work? Let's go ahead and have a look at the Bandit Archer. I'm going to click on the Bandit Archer's spawn. And if you look at his activity configuration, this is all the stuff that he can do, basically. He can melee me, he can ranged, strafe with the bow, run around and attack me, basically. Throw grenades, follow, do all sorts of different stuff. And he'll do any of these things if he gets given a goal to do any of these things. And he has a goal generator on him, which is goal generator attack. And this is exactly the thing that makes him start attacking me if I'm in an enemy faction. Quite simply, initialize goal generator sets it up to grab the game state. It actually is quite smart. It'll know if you update a faction, it should stop attacking. That's how it's able to do that. It'll also bind to when the NPC sees something, or when it hears something, or when someone attacks it. And basically, it will check the affiliation map. And this is what I was talking about earlier. So if you look in here, right, if it sees an enemy, it should start attacking an enemy. If it sees a neutral, it shouldn't attack a neutral. But if a neutral was to attack you, then it should actually work. So this map lets you kind of configure which sensors should cause the enemy to start attacking you and so on. And try add attack goal is where it actually does the attack goal. This will actually add it. It'll get the attitude, make sure that the attitude matches, and then it will add an attack goal, provided that it doesn't already have one here. Finally, and you'll know this if you watch the NPC's video, but these activities here, like range strafe, they will start up if you have a attack goal, which this attack goal generator will add an attack goal. If it sees you, it'll add that attack goal. And then finally, this ranged attack will be like, oh man, we have an attack goal. Let's run this behavior. And this is the actual final like implementation. This is what actually causes the NPC to run around, strafe, try make it so that you can't hit him and so on. That's the actual implementation of it. Every activity has a accompanying behavior tree that it will run alongside the activity. And again, I'd highly recommend watching the NPC's video to learn more about how that works. And I think the best way to actually show you this is to spawn in a bandit and use the gameplay debugger on the bandit. And if you look in the top left corner, because I've got the AI category on, I can see what he's doing. You can see right now, if you look there, there's an attack goal. Hopefully you guys see that attack goal. And it even updates. Look, when I run away, visible becomes false, right? See how he can't see me? There's also a little alert value. That's how alert the enemy is to you. So if you were to run off, eventually that alert value will drop down and he will stop trying to attack me. It might take a little while. Nope, he's still coming after me. I think if I run far enough away. Yeah, there we go. The heroes don't like him. They're going to take him out. It's a pretty awesome system. And that's kind of the flow of events, right? There's that attack goal generator. When he sees me, the attack goal generator adds the attack goal. And then the NPC has a few different attack abilities. And the NPC will select the best one by seeing what one scores the highest. And the score is determined by this function here. Meleeing, for example, will score really low if the enemy can't reach you for obvious reasons, right? If I have a melee weapon, I don't want to attack you. I can't reach you. It does actually still score a little bit. It just scores really low. And the reason it doesn't score nothing is because we still want the NPC to melee if they don't have any other attack they can do. Because we don't just want them to walk off and go back to what they were doing, right? They still need to keep attacking you, but just return a really low number so that attack ranged will become higher scored and they'll get their bow out and do an attack instead. If you look in the attack goal that we add to your player when an NPC sees you, goal attack, there's actually a lot of state that it keeps track of in here. Basically, it will, every so often, it's going to update whether it can still see you, how strongly it can see you, the distance that you are. And the reason it needs to know all this stuff, like how far away you are, whether it can see you, whether it can reach you, is because these attack goals need all that information to generate a score, right? The melee attack goal needs to know whether it can reach you to score it lower. So the goal needs to keep track of all of this stuff, and that's exactly what it does inside of fast tick and slow tick. Fast tick is for stuff that we want to update really often. Slow tick it's just a bit of an optimization. We'll just update certain things like whether we can reach you a little bit less often because it can be a little bit more expensive to check that sort of thing. There is quite a bit going on in the attack goal. It's pretty bulky. Most of it is just updating information. So if it seems a bit intimidating, Narrative Pro, if you treat it like a framework, it's like Unreal Engine itself. You're never going to know every single line of code in Unreal Engine itself, and you probably don't need to know every single line of code in Narrative Pro, but, if for whatever reason you want to update the attack goal, this is where it all is. If you look in BT attack ranged, which is the ranged attack for the enemies where they get the bow out and they try and shoot at you and so on, if you look inside the periodically attack service, this will run every 200 milliseconds or so. And all it does, it just says, can we attack? If so, attack. And all it does is it finds the ability with that input.attack tag on it, and it just activates that manually. So basically, when you attack, you click the left mouse button, but because AI don't have that, they have to find the attack at the left mouse button, and then they just activate it manually. And that's how NPCs attack you, essentially. And yes, that is a current sort of limitation, is right now NPCs will just spam the attack. They don't really have the ability to do alt attacks and stuff. It wouldn't be particularly hard to extend Narrative Pro and add that sort of thing if you read through the code and understood it. But it is something you should note, is that by default, we just keep spamming the input.attack. We don't have logic for doing alt attacks and different things like that right now. Last thing I want to talk about is should attack. This is a very important thing. The NPC will make sure that it actually can attack. And the way that it will do that, it'll see, can I actually see the enemy for a start? But am I within attack range as well? And also, can I attack? Is my attack frequency met? And basically what this is at higher difficulty levels, NPCs will attack a lot more aggressively, a lot more quickly. At lower difficulty levels, they will attack a lot less quickly. And I want to quickly mention that every attack needs to tell bots how far it can be used from. A bot needs to know, if I have a sword, how close can I get before I should attack? If I have a rifle, I can attack from way further away. You need to actually tell it that. Now, everything that we give you out of the box does this. And again, if you're copy pasting stuff like I show you, you won't really need to worry about this, but just in the interest of showing you guys, if I was to look at the rifle attack, right? A bot that has the rifle will be using the firearm attack. And if you look, it implements get bot attack range, and it tells narrative, okay, if a bot has a rifle, they can attack as long as they're within the trace distance, right? So if the rifle shoots 10,000 units far away, bots will know, okay, I can shoot someone as long as I'm within 10,000 units of them. So if a bot has this rifle and he's 12,000 units away, the bot will know to run towards me and not try and attack me, basically. So if you're implementing custom attacks and you want bots to be able to use them, it's up to you. You need to remember to go into your attack and implement get bot attack range and tell it the attack range. I think it will default to like 10,000 or something, but if you want a more specific one, you need to do that. Same goes for the frequency. There is a get bot attack frequency, and you can tell the bot how often they should be able to use the attack as well, and the bot will respect that. And the bot will also scale this by the difficulty that you have set. So for people that want bots to attack faster on higher or lower difficulty settings, if you search for frequency in the project settings, I swear it's in here. Here it is, attack frequencies. There we go. So basically on easy mode, it'll take the frequency that you're supposed to be able to attack at and multiply it by 5. So if you can shoot a pistol every 0.2 seconds, if you're on easy, the bot will actually, in reality, only shoot every 1 second. So you can scale by the difficulty if you want that as well. The other thing to talk about is attack tokens. This defines how many bots can attack you at one time. And this is used by games like Doom, and we've added that for people that want that sort of behavior. I'll just show you that as well. A big problem is like you often don't want NPCs to all spam attack you at once. It leads to really quite frustrating gameplay. If I change my gameplay difficulty to easy and I spawn in 3 enemies here, you'll notice only one of them's actually going to attack me at any given time. And in fact, because my attack frequency is turned down so low for easy mode, you can see he's barely attacking me. I could probably make the settings a little bit harder here. But you can see these other guys, they'll just kind of look busy. They'll just kind of wander around or whatever. And that's because this guy has an attack token, and these guys don't have attack tokens. But they can steal tokens from each other. So I'll show you what I mean. If I run over here, you can see this guy is able to steal that attack token. So they are able to do that as well. And if I was to turn my difficulty up here, there would be more attack tokens available. So if I was to go to like hard, for example, there should be 3 attack tokens now, I believe, and they should all basically be able to attack me at once. Yeah, there you go. And the game basically becomes a lot harder. Unless you're an absolute dodging expert like myself. Oh my god, look at this. Look at this, guys. MLG. Oh. I should probably talk about these camera effects too. You can see like when you have low stamina, there'll be grey borders on the screen if you have red on the screen for low health. I'll show you how those are set up because they're like pretty simple as well. If you search for hurt camera modifier and browse to that, there's actually a hurt one, but there's also a stamina camera modifier as well. If you open these up, they're really pretty simple. These are called camera modifiers, and they literally have a function that fires off, I believe, every frame. And in this case, we just check what percentage of health you have left and return that. And they apply a post-processed effect. And if you look somewhere, I don't actually know where it is. Post-processed materials. There you go. There's this hurt overlay material that we apply to the screen. If you don't like these modifiers or you want to make your own, simply search for Narrative Camera Manager, open it up, and you can change all the camera modifiers in here. I believe they are in... Yep, here you go, right here. Default modifiers, you can add them, you can remove them. There's actually a pretty cool one we use for when you're aiming down sights. We blur the edges of the screen. That's kind of a cool one as well. I get a rifle, and we get my rifle out. We put a scope on it. You can see it'll blur out the edges of the screen. Pretty awesome. Cool effect. I think stealth really deserves like its own video, but just to kind of quickly touch on this. Basically, depending on how strongly the enemy can see you or hear you, that alert value on the top left corner there will go up at different rates. You can see things like crouching will affect the loudness of footsteps. You can actually see he heard one of my footsteps there. I'm within a range that if I start walking, he's starting to have a little bit more alert. But it's only when that alert value reaches 1 that he will actually see me. And the same should be true. Like, I can sneak around. He's not hearing me. That alert value is not going up. But if I start to enter his vision, And this is all, it's based on the angle and also how far away I am. But you can see once I start to come into range here, any moment, there you go. Yep, you see that? You see that? And I managed to get out of the sight cone in time. But if I didn't, and he became alert, he would start attacking me. So that's kind of what that alert value does. And yeah, like I said, I think I'll do another video on stealth because it's kind of a whole nother rabbit hole to jump down. We'd probably need another sort of hour, 30 minutes or so. So I think we'll leave it out of this one and we'll leave that for the next one. Should we discuss anything more? I think cover would be a nice one to talk about. I'll quickly touch on cover. In the default player, if you give them the shooter ability set, they will have the ability to do cover. The RPG ability set does not contain cover by default because most like RPG style games will not need cover. And I believe it's Q to activate cover. You can see that you can sort of walk along and traverse cover. And if I had a weapon, you can press Q to release from cover as well. If I had a weapon, I should be able to actually peek from cover. So if I put on bow and arrow, for example, you can see that cover will position the camera on the side of the character that you've last sort of walked over to. And it will move you out from cover when you attack. You can see here, I should peek out. Yep. And then you can peek back into cover. It's not really made for bows, but it does actually work surprisingly well with the bow. Nice. So that's the cover. And there's also a useful debugging command if you do in.cmc cover debug 1. You can actually see what the cover system is doing. Things like peeking depend on whether the left and right side are blocked. You can see in the top corner there, right side is free, but the left side is blocked. And what that means is when I aim, it'll peek out of that side, basically. So yeah, and if you are free on the top, it'll auto crouch you as well. And you can sort of peek over cover, shoot, and then go back down into cover. I'm kind of surprised how well it works with the bow there, but if you want to look more at how cover works, it can get a little bit complex, to be honest, because a lot of the code is in the C++ character movement component. But if you look inside of GA cover, this is where it will fire off cover, and it calls this function here, try enter cover, and this is where it's all handled in the CMC. If you know C++, you should be able to sort of make your way through this code and understand it. If you're more of a beginner, it's probably not something you're going to be able to modify realistically. It's a little bit out of reach for a beginner, I would say. Guys, I'm going to leave it there. I'm supposed to be on break, not making this video, but I couldn't help myself because I know so many people have a lot of questions with the 2.2 update and you know, combat generally. I really don't want to leave you guys hanging because there's so much good in this plugin, and I know how frustrating it is when you see all these cool features and you don't know how to use them. There's a lot more to cover, honestly. Even stuff like the equipment here just reminded me on the ground. When you take equipment, it can modify your player's attributes. I don't think I even discussed that. I guess I'll quickly talk about that. Like any of these example clothing items, you can see that they can apply gameplay effects to you, like this equipment modifier, and they can modify your armor and stuff like that. So have a look at some of the clothing items in the demo map too. I think that's a good way to learn different things. And yeah, please leave more suggestions. I think, to be honest, as long as this video is, I still don't think it's covered everything with regards to combat. And I think all I can say for now, if you have anything that's not covered outside of this video, study those demo items because I think you will learn a hell of a lot from them. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you in the Discord. If you have any questions or anything, do let us know. All right, see you guys later.